Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the MHA What If with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku Accidentally Created Multiple Identities? All credits for this video go to their respective authors, so please support the real author. Check out the link in the description for more details. Please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. A vlog. Ciro grimaced. That's just sad, Kaminari, Jiro interjected. Oh, come on. Kaminari exclaimed, leaping out of his seat, eager to give them his reasoning. I think it would be awesome. Just think about it, in the future most of us are going to be pro-heroes. Or half-witted sidekicks, Jiro smirked. And maybe they'll be super famous. Think about what it would be like, looking back and seeing what we got up to when we were at UA. He finished, ignoring Jiro's snarky comments. He hadn't even involved her in the conversation to begin with. I mean, come on. Kaminari! Ida exclaimed. Oh boy, here we go. Publishing videos of life within UA walls would be unacceptable considering the privacy of our teachers and fellow pupils. It is important that our school remains dignified and furthermore that. Relax, Ida. Mina interrupted, expertly swooping in to save Kaminari. He doesn't have to publish them online. We could store them up and release them when we're pro-heroes. Hey, that actually sounds super cool. Kirishima joined in. Imagine what the reactions would be like? The famous Class 1A, before we became heroes. You guys realize that we're not actually heroes yet, right? Ciro pointed out. Don't spoil my fun, Ciro. Kaminari exclaimed. Anyway, we can delete them later on for whatever reason if we want. So, what do you say? Mina asked Ida excitably. Ida contemplated this for a moment, the light shining off his glasses in a weirdly studious way as he thought. Yes, I don't see why not. It could be an excellent way of advertising our in-class dynamics and studious lifestyle during our time at UA. Moreover, we could look back at the videos and learn from. We could do one video on each class member. Uraraka suggested eagerly, bouncing up and down. Wouldn't that be cool? As student numero 1, I would be honored to be your rising star. Aoyama grinned brilliantly. Well, if we're going to do it that way, we might as well do it in number order to make it as fair as possible, Yaoyorozu agreed. Kaminari shot excitable glances between his classmates, not actually believing that they were agreeing with his idea. Ooh, what number does that make me? Hagakure asked eagerly. Will my video be soon? Don't you know your own student number? Jiro responded, you're seat 16, so that must be your number 2. 16? But that's ages away, the invisible girl ummed, the sleeves of her uniform flapping around in obvious irritation. Ooh, that means I'm second. Mina suddenly realized. Man, the girls really were into this idea. We'll have to do them all more than once though, Tokoyami acknowledged, who was perched on top of his desk and listening in from across the classroom. Ida had given up on telling him off from doing that. We are likely to change as the years progress. Yeah, but that makes it fun to, compare them and stuff, like what Ida said. Uraraka pointed out. You don't mind being number 20, do you, Momo? Questioned Sue. Not at all, Yaoyorozu replied quickly. By that time the process would be more proficient anyway. The conversation continued for some time, with most of the class swapping ideas and suggestions eagerly. That was until Sue hopped into the center of their circle to bring to their attention something very interesting. Momo, why are you number 20 if there are only 19 of us? There was a sudden silence as a joint confusion washed over the class. Oh yeah, said Mina. That is a little weird. Which number's missing? Well, the desk behind Bakugo's empty, but I thought that was just because no one wanted to sit next to him, Kaminari replied. What did you say, Bisudi? Was the explosive retort. They ignored him. Bakugo's number 17, which makes the missing guy number 18, right? Kirishima concluded. Or girl, said Jiro. Or girl, Kirishima quickly agreed. But we haven't really been at school for very long yet. Perhaps it's just a mistake, or someone hasn't been able to arrive yet, ribbit, said Sue. Maybe Mr. Aizawa doesn't like the number 18? Hagakure suggested. I could imagine that being Midnight's fault, Mina giggled. Well then, Kaminari interjected, pulling out his phone and turning on the front-facing camera. Looks like we've got the topic of our first video. He clicked play and zoomed in on the back of Bakugo's head, or maybe just the empty chair that was collecting dust behind him. It wasn't very clear. The mystery of student number 18. Midoriya can't help but feel lucky. He had a quirk, and not just any quirk, it's All Might's. The best hero out there. And now, he's passed the UA entrance exam. Soon, he'll be going to the greatest hero course in all of Japan. It just feels too good to be true. Of course, there are some downsides to all this. Midoriya didn't actually score a single attack point in the exam, getting in purely on the rescue points he got from that nice girl with the gravity quirk. Then he really needed to get a grip on One for All. Preventing the shattering bones thing would be nice. Oh yeah, and now he has to face the fact that everyone in his current school thinks he's quirkless. And the exam results have just rolled in. Oh, listen up, the teacher began in his usual dreary tone. No one started listening, but despite this, he carried on. For those going to schools with entrance exams, I have the results back now. That managed to make most people shut up. Midoriya felt himself sweating. He was scribbling in his notebook, trying to ignore the fact that his teacher was probably leaving the UA results until last for some sort of dramatic suspense. Of course, Kaken wasn't at all worried. The school already mailed the results to their homes, so he knew that he passed. Well, Midoriya didn't know for sure, but it was pretty obvious at this point. People kept glancing at Kaken, eyeing up his confident snarl and the relaxed way that he tilted back on his chair, feet up on the desk. He knew the school wouldn't touch him. It never had. He was their prized pupil. They wouldn't give him detention for something as trivial as putting his dirty shoes on the desk or blatantly bullying someone or telling them to commit suicide or whatever. Midoriya just let these bitter thoughts circle around his mind as he analyzed a recent villain attack on his phone. He didn't care if he got caught at this point. It's not like anyone was paying him much attention. Anyway, this attack was very intriguing. The heroes seemed to have caught some sort of, well, it wasn't very clear, a hideout? Somewhere in a rundown apartment block not far from school. They had the area barricaded off, but a large crowd was gathering. The villains had the entire population of the building as their hostages in a kind of reflex move once they were caught. One had a fire quirk and another seemed to be slowly destabilizing the building. School would be finishing any minute now. As soon as it did, Midoriya had plans on running to the site to see the events unfold in person. And finally, UA has emailed us the results for Katsuki Bakugo and Izuku Midoriya. Oh no, here it comes. He could hear people around him start to snigger and point in his direction. The way Midoriya held his head down, obviously avoiding their stares, did seem to indicate that he wasn't exactly happy with the results he'd already received. Midoriya felt himself brace for an explosion, literally and metaphorically. Kaken's reaction was bound to be, well yeah, explosive. Congratulations, Bakugo, first place in the entrance exam, the teacher said, obviously impressed but not too surprised. The attention was drawn away from Midoriya for a moment as his classmates basked in the glory that was Kaken, who held his head high, arms crossed and a proud smile etching across his face. They threw compliments at him and a couple of the girls even asked for his autograph for when he's a pro hero. And then finally, we have Midoriya. And the attention's back. Quirkless Deku, useless, pointless, pitiful Deku. The teacher paused, eyes narrowing and scrolling up and down on his computer frantically, like he couldn't believe what he was seeing. 7th place. The whispers stopped. Midoriya didn't look up. He focused on his phone and continued writing notes, but his hands were shaking, knees trembling. Kaken's head turned slowly, red eyes meeting green. That was when the bell rang for the last day of school. Midoriya packed away his things as quick as lightning, shoved his phone in his pocket and ran out the door before another word could be said. He didn't stop running until school was well out of sight. He had purposely headed in the opposite direction to home. He really didn't feel like bumping into Kaken anytime soon. Wait, what was he so afraid of? He had a quirk now. He could defend himself, right? He was going to he would be a hero. And heroes don't shrink in the presence of bullies, Don't tremble at the very thought of them. No, he had to be stronger, braver. But not right now. Right now, there's a villain attack up ahead of them, and things seem to be escalating. The villains were in chains, being hauled into police cars, but the building ahead of them was on fire. Rescue heroes pulled people from windows and others treated those covered in burns or who had inhaled too much smoke. Moreover, the building itself seemed to be falling apart, disintegrating whilst these thoughts buzzed around Midoriya's mind as he joined the back of the forming crowd. It wasn't exactly a safe place to be. The police seemed to be trying to push people back and away from the danger. Midoriya was standing on the pavement. He could feel the heat being radiated off the collapsing building. This wasn't like any villain attack he'd ever witnessed. Maybe this time it was best that he backed off. He was going to do just that when he heard a scream. He looked up at the building beside him, next door to the raging fire. It looked almost completely evacuated, almost. Through a window a few stories up, Midoriya spied a young girl, clutching a bear under one arm, tears streaming down her face. But her screams were drowned out by the sound of the apartment block next door cracking and splinting. Midoriya watched on in horror as the taller building began to tilt dangerously towards the one that this little girl probably called home. His legs moved before he had a chance to think. One for all coursed through him as he leapt into the sky, not thinking of the consequences in store. The force of his jump sent him crashing through the window and rolling to the girl's side, who stood frozen in shock. Midoriya was about to pick her up, run towards the window and to safety, but the shooting pain in his legs told him otherwise. As the walls began to buckle in towards them and the ceiling creaked and groaned, Midoriya could do nothing but wrap his arms around the girl and be her shield as the world came tumbling down. "I can't thank you enough," were the first words Midoriya heard. How could Yue exclude someone who was put into this horrible situation because of an heroic act? Said a squeaky voice. Midoriya didn't recognize it, but the shaking, emotion-filled tone of the first person was definitely familiar. "And the money to keep the life support on. Is there a way that I can repay you?" his mother continued. "Mom," Midoriya tried to say, but the words couldn't come out of his mouth. He tried to open his eyes, to see her tired, sobbing face, but his eyelids felt so heavy, heavier than All Might sitting on top of a fridge, and he knew firsthand how heavy that was. Now, Mrs. Midoriya," continued the squeaky voice. "Seeing your son awake and healthy would be more than enough. But I am awake. Please don't cry, I'm right here." But his mother kept crying, horrible, hysterical sobs filled his ears. More than anything, Midoriya wanted to give her a big hug, but his arms wouldn't move, nothing would. Midoriya couldn't flinch when he felt his mother's warm hand on his own. It had surprised him, but it was kind and gentle. He wanted to cry. He didn't understand where he was or how he got there or what he had done to make her so upset. "I am a firm believer that Izuku can hear us," said the other voice. Yes, I can. Talk to him, tell him everything that happened. We have the best comatose doctors available. We'll have him up and ready for school as soon as possible." "See comatose?" "Of course, thank you, Principal Nedzu." Inko sobbed. "Principal Nedzu? From you?" He heard the door swing closed as his mother sniffled loudly, her hand clenching his own tightly. "Hang in there, Izuku." Midoriya had been trapped in his body for only a few days after he woke up. Desperate to move, he tried to activate his quirk. He knew it was dangerous, which was why he'd been delaying his attempt. He didn't want to accidentally damage the hospital in the process. But, to his surprise, instead of forcing his body to move, One for All did something entirely different. Midoriya remembers seeing a tunnel of brilliant lights. He remembers feeling hands reaching out for him, pushing him up from his seat and back towards reality, out of the darkness and into the light. When he opened his eyes, his body didn't feel so heavy anymore. Everything felt so light, like he was made of cloud. "Morning, Izuku." It was his mum. Midoriya tilted his head and broke into a brilliant smile. "Mum," he exclaimed. He leapt off his bed and ran towards Inko, opening his arms to pull her into a tight embrace. But Midoriya ran straight through her. His smile faded. He looked down at his hands. They were almost transparent, tinted luminescent green. Midoriya turned and looked back at his mother. She shivered like a draft of cold air had blown past her. Does it feel a little cold in here, Izuku? Should I ask someone to turn the heating up? Midoriya clasped his hands over his mouth. He hadn't moved at all. His body lay motionless on his hospital bed, covered in wires and an oxygen mask. Oh, never mind. It must have just been a little draft I brought in with me, she said sadly, sitting down on the chair beside his bed. Mom. Midoriya called, walking over to her and his body. See, can you hear me? UA started yesterday, she continued. It did. Apparently Katsuki wouldn't talk about it, but he seemed a little happier than usual, less grumpy perhaps. But, that means, did I lose my place? No, Nedza said he'd reserve it for me the other day. Maybe he knows about One for All. Oh no, All Might. What am I going to do? I've let him down. He gave me his power, but now how am I ever going to be able to live up to it? When you wake up, I'm sure you'll make plenty of friends. Wouldn't that be nice? But I am awake. But no matter how hard Midoriya yelled, screamed, even his mother wouldn't hear him. He glanced at the clock. School must have just started. Then at the closed door to his room. He wandered over to it, practically floating, but his hand passed straight through the doorknob. Looking back at his mother and body one last time, Midoriya held his breath and walked straight through the door. Kaminari, I don't think that's a good idea. So, the one who makes Bakugo blow up the most gets the most points? Asked Shiro. Yeah. Kaminari replied, filming the entire discussion. You're just going to get yourselves killed. Not to be hypocritical, but do you have a death wish? Midoriya exclaimed, waving his arms about and disturbing the dust on desk, but, of course, no one could hear him. Do you have a death wish or something? Said Jiro. Exactly. Thank you, Jiro. Oh, come on, it'll be hilarious. Kaminari insisted. I have an important question. Uraraka exclaimed, raising her hand eagerly. What does the winner get? I'm still against this. You said you liked Machi, right? He suggested. Yes. I will win this. I like your enthusiasm. I don't. In that moment, Kaken stormed in, grinding his teeth and mumbling about something as he looked at his phone and threw his bag on his table. He froze and narrowed his eyes when he saw everyone staring at him. What do you extras want? Well, nice knowing you. You look touchy this morning, Bakugo, Mina pointed out. Huh. This isn't going to end well. All right, quiet down, homeroom class is starting, Mr. Aizawa announced as he ambled into the room. Thank goodness for that. Today's training will be a little different, Aizawa began. He held out a blue card that read the words, Rescue. The students around Midoriya muttered excitably about what would be in store, and Midoriya could hear Ito wondering aloud about his new class representative responsibilities. This special training is at an off-campus facility, so we'll be taking a bus to get there, he explained. That's all, start getting ready. 15 minutes later, and all hell had already broken loose. Stop, Mr. Aizawa, your fighting style isn't suited for this. Midoriya exclaimed. But no one could hear him. No one could ever hear him. Third, you protect the students. Midoriya gritted his teeth and followed Mr. Aizawa into battle. He knew he couldn't do anything, but it wasn't like he could get hurt. Unfortunately, Aizawa could. All Midoriya could do was watch on in horror as his friends were scattered and fought desperately for their lives, as Mr. Aizawa was crushed beneath the force that was Nomu. All Might arrive just in time. But Midoriya knew the truth. As he battled the Nomu, he could see the steam rising off his body. He had reached his limit. But of course, that wouldn't stop him. He defeated the creature in an incredible display of power. And all Midoriya could do was watch. But when that disintegration guy charged at his mentor, who could barely lift his shaking fist, he couldn't just stand there and do nothing. No one ever found the answer behind that great flash of green light that tossed the villain across the USJ, of that blurry figure that appeared out of nowhere. Midoriya did not wake for days after that. Hello, young Midoriya. All Might. You're okay. Midoriya exclaimed, leaping out of his body as soon as he heard the voice. Granted, he probably shouldn't have. All this jumping in and out of his body made his head hurt so much when he was forced to return to it. I'm sorry I haven't had the time to visit you recently, but I'm sure your mother has already told you all about the events of the USJ. I wouldn't know, I only just woke up. But, I mean I was there anyway, so it's not like it matters. I decreased my time limit again with that attack. No way. I don't know how much longer I have left as the world symbol of peace. Don't say that. You're All Might. You can do it, I know you can. I'm sure that you would be telling me to not beat myself down if you were here. I sure am. It's such a shame. The sports festival is about to begin, but you won't be able to attend. I'm so sorry, All Might. I really am. This is all my fault. Midoriya stared down at his frail, lifeless body, and at All Might's skeletal form that leaned over it. I'm trying, I really am, but I can't move. At least one for all lets me leave. It's super weird. I'll tell you all about it when I can. I promise. He couldn't bear to see him looking like that, so sad, so alone. I will find a way to fix this, All Might, I promise. Kaminari filmed as Uraraka helped float a new table and chair into Class 1A, setting it up at the back of the classroom as the other 4 tables in the row were rearranged to accommodate it. And here we witness the grand arrival of the purple pineapple. Kaminari sniggered as he zoomed in on Shinsu's emotionless face. Who are you again? He asked. Kaminari flinched before quickly introducing himself. Kaminari, at your service. The guy with the electric quirk who got owned in the sports festival, Jiro explained. Hey, you didn't even make it to the tournament round. No arguing, everybody. Ida exclaimed. We have a new member of our group and give a good example to... It's a bit too late for that, Ida, Uraraka interrupted. Shinso already knows us all from the sports festival. You guys are missing something super important, said Kaminari suddenly. Shinso is student number 21. So, said Shinso. Gasp. You don't know about the legend. Mina replied, spinning around in her chair expertly. The legend? Of student number 18. Kirishima explained, pointing at the empty desk behind Bakugo. What? Why don't I have that desk? Shinso questioned with a frown. Exactly, Kaminari smiled. I still think there's another invisible person who doesn't like talking. Hagakure interjected, repeating her favorite theory once more. Yes, but then Mr. Aizawa would put work on their desk at the very least, Todoroki acknowledged. Was Todoroki actually interested in this stuff? He publicly announced that he didn't want to make friends with any of them at the sports festival, so what was with that? Oh, it must be a real mystery if even Todoroki is intrigued. Mina exclaimed. He said as he turned back to his phone, not paying much attention to them anymore. Shinso still looked very confused. So, did someone get expelled or? Nope. They just never turned up for school. Uraraka replied. She and Shinso had been on the same team for the cavalry battle. He had brainwashed her at first, but when she accidentally woke up, she started helping Shinso to the best of her abilities, even though he forced her to be on his team in the first place. Consequently, she had become his only friend in his new class, and really all of UA. The students of 1C didn't really get along with him either. We have attempted talking to Mr. Aizawa about the situation, but it is evident that it is a matter not concerning us. Ida continued, karate chopping the air as he spoke. Which is why we're so curious. Hagakure interjected. Would you just leave it? Bakugo snapped. It doesn't freaking matter anyway. To you maybe, Kaminari frowned. Why do you get so worked up about it anyway? Do you know something we don't? He asked, turning his camera to the explosive teen. Shut up, dunce face. Shinso smirked at the insult. Do you even know your classmates' real names? Not really, he's pretty self-centered, Siro explained. Say that again, elbows, I dare you. You're self-centered, said Shinso. All right, you're... He froze, eyes blank and lifeless. Just put your head on the table and shut up, Shinso ordered. And Bakugo did just that. That was awesome, Kirishima smirked, but Shinso saw his smile waver as he said it. Shinso ignored him as he sat down on his new seat. Thank you, Uraraka. No prob, she exclaimed and skipped across the classroom to her own seat. Sit down, everyone. Homeroom class is about to begin, Ida announced. We're all sitting, Kaminari pointed out. Yeah, you're the only one standing, Kirishima added. Kaminari smiled. Like most of his classmates, he had noticed something wasn't quite right with Ida ever since he disappeared from the sports festival for some sort of family emergency, but at least he was starting to act like himself again. Shut up, all of you, said Aizawa, and he moped into the room, mug of coffee in hand. Bakugo, what are you doing? Shinso broke his hold of him immediately and Bakugo's head snapped up, dead eye bags. Everyone stared at him. I'm just going to pretend that didn't just happen, Aizawa said tiredly. On another note, I hope everyone's welcomed Shinso to the hero course. Shinso nodded as the rest of the class turned their gaze on him. But, Kaminari, put your phone away. But sir, I have a question, he retorted. Make it quick. Why didn't Shinso just take that seat? Kaminari questioned, pointing at seat. Because that's not his seat. Then whose is it? Not his. But, put your phone away before I confiscate it. Kaminari sighed and turned off his phone grudgingly. Right, today we will be looking at the results of the sports festival and internships. Here are your offers. He clicked a button and the offers lit up on the board behind him. They spent the rest of the lesson comparing results and talking about internships. But before they could leave and continue with their day, Aizawa held Ida back. Ida, there is a duty as class representative that I would like you to attend to this evening. Of course. What is it, may I ask? I'll tell you later. Meet me here after school. Yes, sir. Think it's to do with student 18? Kaminari asked eagerly as they left the classroom, shivering slightly in a draft of cold air. Will you shut up about that, you idiot? Bakugo exclaimed. Little did they know, but for once, he was absolutely right. Kaminari, put your phone away. But sir, I have a question. Kaminari exclaimed. Make it quick. Why didn't Shinso just take that seat? Kaminari questioned. He pointed right at Midoriya, who just blinked and stared back. Because that's not his seat. Then whose is it? Not his. But, put your phone away before I confiscate it. Midoriya looked glumly at his feet as Kaminari stopped filming. Being a ghost could be so lonely sometimes, well, all the time really. Although he could swear there were others. He saw them from time to time. They followed him but tried to stay out of sight. Midoriya didn't understand why ghosts felt the need to feel shy, but he respected their hesitancy anyway and left them alone, hoping that they would approach him on their own one day. Midoriya didn't really pay attention to that homeroom class. It was all about internships and, considering no one actually saw him take part in the sports festival, he very obviously had none. Ida, there is a duty as class representative that I would like you to attend to this evening. Midoriya perked up in interest. He couldn't think of anything Mr. Aizawa could want Ida to do off the top of his head. Of course. What is it, may I ask? Ida replied, voicing Midoriya's questions. I'll tell you later. Meet me here after school. Yes, sir. Midoriya had half the mind of hovering around his teacher to see if he could find out what this mystery request would be, but then got distracted by Kaminari, who walked right through him, shivered, then said, Think it's to do with student 18? Will you shut up about that, you idiot? Kakin yelled back at him. Do you really think so? But why would Mr. Aizawa want to talk to Ida about me? Maybe it's to stop you from being so curious about it all, Midoriya muttered, not bothering to keep his thoughts inside his head. It wasn't like anyone could hear him anyway. So, that afternoon, Midoriya followed Ida up the stairs and back into Class 1A, where Aizawa sat, face down on his desk. He lifted his head to the noise of Ida entering. Sir, I am here for your class representative duty that you mentioned this morning, he announced eagerly, doing his chopping the air thing in the process. Yeah, I got it. Sit down, Mr. Aizawa instructed. Ida perched on the seat directly in front of the teacher's desk and Midoriya floated by expectantly. What do you know of these videos Kaminari seems to be doing? Aizawa questioned. You're worried he's posting them online after that USJ incident, aren't you? Midoriya realized. He is keeping a video diary of sorts of our classes' time at UA. I have already insisted that he does not post them online until a much later date. Good, Aizawa responded drearily. Is that all you wish to ask of me? No, actually, he and the rest of the class also seem to be very interested in this, student 18. Huh. Wait, this is actually about me. Well, it is an intriguing mystery. It would be understandable if the student in question pulled out of UA for one reason or another. However, Shinso has now joined our number but has not taken the obviously empty desk. Yeah, I get that it's confusing. Are you going to tell him about me? Please, please, come on, I hate everyone being left in the dark like this. Might I ask why they are absent? Aizawa sighed. It would make more sense if I showed you. Do you have any plans after school? No, I do not. Good. Come with me then and we'll meet student 18. Really? Oh, but of course I see now. Am I introducing myself on behalf of the rest of class 1A? Something like that. The trip to the hospital was tense. Of course, Ida still had no idea what was going on. Midoriya didn't know why Aizawa wouldn't tell him the truth straight away. Maybe he just didn't want him asking questions until they arrived. Yeah, that actually made a lot of sense. The hospital wasn't far from UA. Midoriya knew the way off by heart, with all the flying back and forth he'd done over the past few weeks. He would have sat in the car with Aizawa and Ida, but cars tended to slip right through him. Chairs did too actually. Midoriya was forced to just hover above them in the illusion that he was sitting down, but it felt more comfortable to kind of sit in class when everyone else was doing so too. And so, the ghost waited patiently at the hospital entrance for them to arrive, and then half-walked half-hovered beside them as Aizawa checked them in and led his pupil through the winding corridors of the hospital, finally reaching a door labeled Izuku Midoriya. Midoriya watched as Aizawa opened the door and Ida's face fell. His eyes rested on the small, broken body of his would-be classmate and he froze in shock. This is Midoriya, Aizawa explained. You're student 18. More silence followed. Midoriya couldn't bear to see that look on Ida's face anymore, so he let himself slip back into his body and heard the conversation. With his own ears, if that made any sense. What happened? Ida questioned after a moment. He got caught up in a villain attack and was crushed by a falling building, Mr. Aizawa replied matter-of-factly. He saved someone's life. We can't withdraw someone from the school for such a heroic act, apparently. Apparently? Midoriya thought. What do you mean by apparently? So, he's in a coma? Yes. Has been for about a month or two. I see. Introduce yourself. The doctors reckon he can hear us. Oh, well, Midoriya, my name is... I'm just going to head downstairs for a bit and pick up an update on Midoriya's condition from the nurses. I'll back in a minute or so. Oh, of course, Mr. Aizawa. Midoriya heard the door swing shut and Ida pull up a chair to his bedside. My name is Tenya Ida, the class representative of 1A in UA Heroics course. I am student 4, I believe, and you are student 18. He cleared his throat and silence fell between them again. I'm so sorry about this, Ida. It must be a shock for you, Midoriya tried to say, but the words never left his mind. You remind me of my brother. Midoriya almost jumped out of his body when he said that. He hadn't said anything for ages. He must have really been thinking about it. My brother is W's a wonderful hero. But he was attacked by the hero killer, Stain. I don't suppose you know about him if you've been stuck here for so long. He hesitated, but then continued with his story. It was as if, because Midoriya couldn't move or speak back, Ida trusted him with his secrets so easily, even though, to him, they were complete strangers. He targets heroes that he believes to be unworthy of such a title. His voice hitched on those words. He survived the encounter, but he won't be able to walk again. His career as a hero is over. Ida, I had no idea. I'm so sorry. Because of a villain, your path to becoming a hero has been halted too. It makes me so... I don't know. All Midoriya wanted to do was give Ida a big hug, but his arms just wouldn't move. I was going to take an internship in Hosu, where my brother was injured. The hero killer is still there. I guess I thought that I could stop him myself, for my brother. Ida. No, you can't heal. But to think that you found yourself in this situation because of a heroic act? Well, how could I possibly hold a candle to such self-sacrifice? I don't want to end up in a hospital bed like my brother, or like you. You're here because of an act that was regrettable, yet so incredibly inspiring. Sorry about that, Ida, Mr. Aizawa interrupted as the door swung open. And not at all. Ida said in a shocked tone of voice that Mr. Aizawa didn't seem to pick up on. The nurses say that other than teachers from school and his mother, you're the only visitor Midoriya has ever had. That's a horrible thing to hear. Aizawa grunted in some sort of agreement. If you could visit him occasionally, they would be very thankful. But only if you have the time. I could pass the responsibility onto Yaoyorozu if it's too much. Not at all. Ida repeated. If I find myself overwhelmed, I could always pass a different responsibility onto my deputy. But I would very much like to visit Midoriya from time to time if that's possible. Sure. I'll meet you at the entrance in a moment to take you to the train station. Oh, you don't have to? It's fine. I've just got to pick up one more thing. Meet you there in 2 minutes. With that, Midoriya heard the door swing closed once more and Ida sigh deeply. I'll go somewhere else. Revenge is not an option for heroes. I'll leave Stain to someone more experienced and find justice for my brother in living up to his name. It must have been hard for Ida to say that, but Midoriya was proud of him. It was like he just said all of his thoughts aloud, probably not thinking about Midoriya even hearing them. He was glad he could still contribute to UA somehow, if not indirectly. I'll see you soon, Midoriya. Yeah, see you soon, Ida. Midoriya spent some time following each of his classmates during their internships. He hovered on the sunny deck of a ship beside Azui. He managed to blow the litter towards Kirishima and Tetsutisu to help with their cleanup act that Fourth Kind had ordered them to do. He laughed at Kaken being forced into tight jeans and a side-parting haircut with Best Jeanist. He watched on with pride as Ida worked on his speed with a hero who managed villains on the highways. He learnt martial arts with Uraraka, followed Hawks around the city beside Tokoyami, watched Jiro evacuate civilians from a hostage situation, led Todoroki away from the hero killer before his father arrived to arrest him. But no one even knew he was there. Midoriya was everywhere yet nowhere at all. And it was becoming unbearable. Whilst everyone was sitting around discussing their internships, Midoriya floated around the classroom in a way that could best be described as pacing back and forth, even though his feet never really touched the ground. So, One for All must have somehow projected my spirit out of my body. That doesn't really make sense considering All Might never showed any skill related to that in any of his previous fights or to me in person. He definitely has no idea that I can do it, or else he would have told me even though I'm in a coma. Then there's that incident at the USJ. I was almost solid for a moment there. I've heard the others talking about it. They saw me. I managed to blow that hand villain away with a smash even without my body. Then I didn't wake up again for ages. It was as though I used up some kind of energy store. I need to return to my body every night or I just get too exhausted, fall asleep and wake up there anyway. So, when I panicked and activated my quirk to 100% back then, it must have sent me to sleep for enough time to allow me to recharge. Maybe? One for All doesn't make any sense. Why can't I figure this out? How long am I going to be able to stay like this? How long will they keep my space at UA open? How long will they keep life support on? Donate. Close the window. Kaken yelled. He was still worked up over Kirishima and Siro making fun of his side parting, although he'd gotten rid of it by this point. The window is closed, said Mineta, who was sitting right next to it, mumbling about empty lady. No one asked you, Grapehead? He's right though, it does feel strangely cold in here, Ribbit, Azui acknowledged. Midoriya froze, ceasing the mumbling that Kaken would already be complaining about if he could hear it. With all his pacing around, he'd been floating right through his classmates, so much so that they'd begun to notice him for once. It's not you, is it Todoroki? Mina questioned. Todoroki looked up from his book for a moment, shook his head and then returned to it in silence. Huh, does your quirk allow you not to feel me? Midoriya wondered. He tested that theory immediately by constantly putting his hand through his head. Midoriya laughed when he saw him start shaking uncontrollably and trying to use the fire quirk that he'd been repressing to warm himself up. Of course, Midoriya knew why he did that, thanks to his accidental eavesdropping, but no one else did. "It's just a draft, pull yourselves together," said Jiro. Midoriya immediately skipped over to her and hopped straight through her, laughing uncontrollably when the shiver he sent down her spine caused her to jump and almost fall off her chair. After a few moments of confusion, Kaminari pulled his phone out of his pocket and started filming. In the words of Jiro, "It's just a draft, pull yourselves together," Kaminari repeated, smiling. Midoriya wondered if he knew that would encourage him to do the same thing to Kaminari. He almost dropped his phone in surprise. "Aha!" Kaminari explained, "the draft is back." "Is a draft really something worth documenting?" asked Kirishima, raising an eyebrow. "I am more than a draft, thank you very much," Midoriya retorted, and floated through Kirishima for the fun of it. "Okay," Kirishima exclaimed, "who's doing that?" "Todoroki. You're the only one with a temperature-lowering quirk," Kaminari accused. "It isn't me," he replied, not looking up from his book a second time. Midoriya took the opportunity to fly around the classroom, laughing as he made everyone jump, one after the other, from the cold sensation he somehow produced. "It's a draft that somehow only affects one person at a time," Uraraka realized. "Oh yeah? I could put my hand through two people at once." Midoriya smiled, and did just that to her and Azui, who were standing right next to each other. "Or not," they said simultaneously. Kaminari gasped, "I got it. It's a ghost." "Yes. That's stupid," Kaken scowled. Midoriya slapped him in the face. Well, his hand went right through him, but the shiver was satisfactory enough. He never would have done it if he wasn't a ghost, but the fact that he wouldn't be on the receiving end of Kaken's explosions for once really gave him a bit of a confidence boost. "You insulted the ghost," Kaminari yelled. "That you did? Why on earth would there be a ghost at UA?" Zero questioned. "Easy. A hero in training who suffered a terrible accident at school." "That was so close to being right. I can't believe this. Ghosts don't exist." Mina retaliated. Midoriya gave her his signature shiver too. "Then explain that," Kaminari exclaimed. "Okay, this is super creepy," said Uraraka. "Gasp, we should try to contact them." "Oh, no, I hate ghost stories," Hagakure replied, the floating uniform jumping up and down. "But you're the closest real thing to a ghost here," Mina pointed out. "I have a theory," Uraraka exclaimed, bouncing over to Kaminari's camera. "What if the ghost is actually Student 18? Oh my god. I know you're joking, but this is brilliant." "I have a theory too," said Kaken unexpectedly. "Oh yeah? What's that?" asked Kaminari. "That you're all blithering idiots." They should have seen that coming. There is no such thing as ghosts, and even if there were, there's no way one managed to get into the hero course, Shinso sighed, who had been watching inattentively from the back of the classroom this entire time. "Yeah, I know, but wouldn't it be cool?" Uraraka replied. "No, it is not cool." "Everybody sit down," Mr. Aizawa said in his usual monotone voice as he stumbled into view. "Homeroom class is beginning." No one liked getting on the wrong side of Mr. Aizawa, not even Kaminari, so everyone sat down immediately, including Midoriya, and waited for him to begin. "Don't think that you can be slaking off just because you only recently came back from your internships," Aizawa continued. "You have basic hero training next, so go get your costumes. You'll be meeting with All Might at Field Gamma today." "Field Gamma, what's that?" Midoriya heard Kirishima wonder aloud as they went to collect their hero costumes. Once more, he caught a glimpse of the final case that was left behind, covered in dust and marked with a large number 18, his hero costume. He had to find a way to get out of this coma before it's too late. Between internships, new friendships, and even a need to attend to an old one, Uraraka hadn't had much time to focus on studying for her exams. Of course, she simply had to pass if she wanted to go to the summer camp. Then again, Minetta's enthusiasm almost put her off. As for that friendship she had to attend to, she'd been particularly worried about Ida ever since the sports festival. He was putting on a brave face. She didn't know quite what to do when she had learnt about his older brother. It didn't look like he wanted her sympathy, so what was she supposed to do? Pretend it hadn't happened at all? So, when Ida came up to her and asked her to visit the hospital with him, she leapt at the chance. Of course, her first thought was that it was Tensei that they were visiting, but then she remembered he was already out of hospital, or, at the very least, he wouldn't have been in this hospital. I know you said you'd explain everything once we got there. But, Uraraka began, twiddling her thumbs as he signed them in on a visitor's book. I do apologize. Ida exclaimed suddenly. He seemed a little jumpy, like he was really worried about what Uraraka was thinking. No. It's fine, really, I'm actually really honored that you asked me to come with you. I'm just wondering why, or maybe who we're visiting, she questioned. I apologize profusely, he repeated. But I couldn't say anything in front of our other classmates as per Mr. Aizawa's instructions. About what? Uraraka asked as Ida began to lead her through the hospital, past crowded corridors and up many stairs. About his privacy and dignity, I would presume. Whose? Ah, yes, he said, finally realizing how much he'd left his friend in the dark. Well, do you recall the entrance exam to UA? Of course. I was put into the same arena as you were. I remember seeing you there. Oh really? I don't remember that at all. I guess I was a little preoccupied. But what does this have to do with the hospital? She asked. Suddenly Ida stopped. He turned to face Uraraka, pushing his glasses further up his nose and putting his hand on the handle to a door. She glanced at the name plaque beside it, Izuku Midoriya. She didn't know an Izuku Midoriya. What was going on? Trust me, Uraraka, this will all make sense as soon as you see him, I hope. As a shiver went down her spine, probably in anticipation, Ida swung the door open and indicated Uraraka to walk inside ahead of him. She gasped. Lying in a bed, under smooth, white sheets, was a green-haired boy who looked to be about their age. He was covered in freckles, but they were mostly hidden by the oxygen mask that was over his mouth and nose. Wires ran from his arms to machines that let out a steady, rhythmic beeping noise, and tubes to others. It didn't take her long to realize he was on life support, and not much longer to recognize his face. Falling boy, she murmured. Ida closed the door behind them and pulled up a couple of chairs to the boy's bedside. I know this guy. Uraraka continued. I met him in the entrance exam. He took out the 0-pointer with one punch. Oh my gosh, Present Mike said that he'd gotten in. When he wasn't in our class I thought he went to class 1B, but I didn't see him there either. He was here all along. What happened? I thought you would be full of questions, Ida smiled. But it wasn't his usual smile. This was wrong, not forced, but sad. Uraraka sat down beside him, hands over her mouth and tears pricking her eyes. Is he dying? He is in a coma, Ida explained. He did pass the entrance exam, like you presumed. However, not long before school started, he jumped into a villain attack to save a young girl. Uraraka glanced at the numerous cards on the bedside table. They were handmade and looked as though they were drawn by a child. In most of them, a stick figure with a mess of green hair was depicted and surrounded by words like "You're my hero" and "Get well soon." They were crushed by a falling building, continued Ida. I believe he managed to shield the girl, but was hit by falling debris and hasn't awoken since. They sat in silence for a moment as Uraraka processed this. Oh my God, she finally uttered. She just couldn't believe that the boy who risked his life saving her in the entrance exam had done the same thing to help someone else, but was once again left with horrendous injuries, this time being far worse than the last. I have been visiting him periodically since the sports festival, when Mr. Aizawa alerted me, as class president, of the situation. I suppose he was hoping that Midoriya wouldn't remain in this state for so long. This is student 18, isn't it? Might I remind you that there is a good chance that Midoriya can hear us, said Ida. Whoops, she didn't mean it in a bad way. Oh, Uraraka exclaimed. Perhaps you should introduce yourself. Yes, oh of course, she stammered, before turning to the lifeless body of Izuku Midoriya. Achiko Uraraka. Student 5. We met in the entrance exam. I stopped you from tripping over, then, you took out that giant robot like, bam. Then I slapped you in the face, sorry about that, to stop you from falling again. Thanks to the rescue points I got from that, I was 3rd place in the entrance exam overall. But that doesn't really matter. So, yeah, thank you. I'm sure he will appreciate that, Ida replied. Mr. Aizawa said that he hasn't had any other visitors beside us and his family. I'm sure he values our friendship. Yeah. They sat in silence for a while after that. Ida seemed to be in deep thought whilst Uraraka desperately searched for conversation starters. It was awfully difficult to have a conversation with someone who couldn't talk back. So, she started after a while, making Ida flinch in surprise. When you wake up, Midoriya, are you coming back to UA? I think he is, Ida replied for him. Mr. Aizawa is keeping student 18's place free after all. I guess that makes sense. But, won't you be really far behind everyone else with their studies? Oh yes, I hadn't thought of that, said Ida. Midoriya certainly has a powerful quirk, but he seemed to have trouble controlling it. Moreover, we have progressed quite quickly through our first-year syllabus. And we've got exams coming up soon, Uraraka pointed out. Uraraka stared out the window for a moment, wondering how Midoriya would get past all those struggles, until her attention was drawn to a slightly charred, yellow backpack that lay by the comatose patient's bedside. In curiosity, she picked it up and unzipped it. Uraraka! Ida exclaimed, we shouldn't be rooting through Midoriya's things like this. But look, his phone. Uraraka replied, holding up the smartphone to her friend. Despite the situation, when she clicked the on button, it quickly came to life with a decent amount of charge left. Perhaps someone had been charging it for him whilst he was asleep. What about it? She smiled at Midoriya's phone background, a picture of All Might with his ever-undying smile. She knew enough about smartphones from her friend's technologies to know how to unlock it and to navigate it. It wasn't the newest model that Yaoyorozu had and was more similar to Tsu's phone. He doesn't have a passcode on it, Uraraka realized as she unlocked it with ease. What are you doing? Ida hissed with a hushed voice, as if he was trying to hide what they were doing from Midoriya. I'm adding my phone number, you should add yours too. But why? So, when he wakes up, he can contact us. But he will wake up, Uraraka insisted as she filled in her contact details, and then Ida's from memory she tried to call him so many times on her landline it was unreal. Like you said, I'm sure he'll value our friendship. He has barely any contacts other than us. Actually look, it's just Mum, Mitsuki and All Might. He called someone All Might, that's cute. After taking an awkward picture of the three of them, Uraraka closed the phone and slid it back into the backpack before pulling her own bag onto her lap. What are we doing now? Ida questioned. She hoped he wasn't regretting taking her here. Well, you said Midori can still hear us, right? Midori? So, I figured we could help him out with his studies, she exclaimed, showing Ida the first textbook that she could reach from her bag. He frowned for a moment, before breaking out into the widest smile she'd seen on him all day. What a wonderful idea! We could study for our exams here, and with Midoriya able to overhear us, he will have the opportunity to catch up on his work. Yeah. And I can catch up in the process as well. And so, with Ida as enthusiastic as ever, they promptly started their weekly study group. Uraraka, trying not to shiver from the strange draft that filled the room, smiled sadly at motionless, green-haired boy. She couldn't help but think about everything he had missed out on, what great friends they could have been. She never got to truly thank him for saving her from the 0-pointer in the entrance exam. And to think he got into this situation from such a heroic act? How could she ever compare to that? Even unconscious, Midori was such an inspiration to her. This was the least she could do to return the favor. What she didn't know was that Midoriya was hovering right next to her, stammering her thanks from such a kind gesture, even though he didn't really need it. But the muttering fell short of her ears. For it never truly left his lips. Alone. That was how Midoriya felt. He was in a coma, unable to move, to see, to talk. He hated it when the people around his body would speak about his condition as though he wasn't there. But it wasn't much better when they spoke to him, like they were trying to involve him in a conversation that he couldn't add to, no matter how hard he tried. It made him feel so guilty that he made them feel this way. Well, them being mainly his mum and All Might. Oh, and that little girl too, the one he saved. Her name was Kichi. He didn't know her last name, because when her and her father visited that one time, he obviously only addressed his daughter by her first name. Although, he didn't think she'd mind, he was just thinking about all this too much. That generally happens when you have nothing else to think about. Being a ghost was almost worse, almost. Yes, he could move, see and talk, but no one could see him. He felt so helpless, standing by, unable to lend a hand that just wasn't there. Midoriya felt like he was intruding in people's lives. He considered most of his classmates as close friends, but of course, none of them, except maybe Kaken, really knew him. It felt wrong. Then Ida visited him. It was the first time someone looked at him and didn't just feel pity. The doctors were always so kind. There was one who had some kind of muscle-flexing quirk, Dr. Adachi. He always told Midoriya that he was so honored to have him as a patient. To be able to care for and help an aspiring hero made him feel like a hero himself. Midoriya really liked that. He put so much effort into ensuring Midoriya's muscle mass didn't completely disappear over the months that he lay motionless. Dr. Adachi was quite young, and Midoriya seemed to be his very first coma patient, but he didn't mind. His enthusiasm and bright smile, that he didn't know Midoriya could see, reminded him of All Might. Yeah, not all heroes wore capes. But, nevertheless, Dr. Adachi still seemed to apologize for the situation Midoriya had found himself in. Ida, however, after his first, emotional introduction, started to speak with Midoriya as a friend, confiding his secrets with him and trusting him more than he had ever thought was possible. Maybe that was just because he actually couldn't speak to spill them, but Midoriya hoped that he had a trusting face or something. Then, Uraraka joined their number. Her bouncy personality filled Midoriya with a hope that he could get out of this prison of a condition. That one day he could actually have a conversation with the people he considered to be his first true friends. Suddenly he wasn't so alone anymore. What? Shinso is like, awesome. Uraraka exclaimed, accidentally making her book float. I must admit, I do not know much about him. I hope I'm not being too quick to judge. Ida replied. No, I do get it. I don't think he's the social type. You could say that again. Have you seen the way he glares at people from across the classroom? Midoriya laughed. But he's always super nice to me. He tries talking to Ojiro sometimes too, because he hypnotized him into being on our team in the cavalry battle too. But I don't think he's quite as forgiving as I am, Uraraka acknowledged as she retrieved her floating things. I too would be hesitant if I were forced onto his team, Ida admitted. I'm not sure what I would have done. No, actually I think I would have helped Shinso too. He didn't feel like he had any other choice than to brainwash people into helping him, so showing him that he didn't have to do that was probably the best option for everyone, Midoriya explained, not that they could hear his contribution. Ida sighed. Anyway, I'm sure you will be able to have your own opinions on the matter once you officially join Class 1A, he told Midoriya's sleeping body. Yeah, I look forward to talking to you both about it. We have to head off now, Uraraka explained, but we'll be back next week. All these study sessions are really helping my grades. Ida looked quite pleased with himself. And I hope that you will be able to surprise Mr. Aizawa with your knowledge when you return to us, Midoriya. And that I will, Ida. See you soon, Midori. Uraraka smiled and waved as the two of them finished packing up their things and left him alone in his hospital room. Midoriya didn't follow them. He felt like he'd done enough for the day and had half the mind of returning to his body and sleeping until the morning, maybe after wandering around the hospital for a bit and checking up on the patients that didn't know he even existed. You know, I thought they'd never leave. Midoriya screamed and shot backwards through the wall, flying right through Uraraka as she skipped away, who shivered but thought nothing of it. What was that? Who was that? Hey, sorry about that, kiddo. Did I make you jump? The voice continued. To Midoriya's surprise, through the wall in front of him, came a partly transparent, purple figure. What? Midoriya managed. Who are you? The purple woman laughed. I'm sorry, but you should see the look on your face right now. I thought ghosts weren't allowed to get scared. Midoriya just stared, frozen in shock as random people walked through him. Come on, let's talk back in your room. You're making people shiver. Without further explanation, she grabbed Midoriya's arm and pulled him back through the wall and into his hospital room. She could touch him. How are you, who are? Hey, calm down for a moment, kid. You're making your body freak out. Midoriya looked down at himself. He didn't seem any different, but his heart rate was certainly up, as indicated by the repetitive beeping noise the machines around him were making. Sorry. No need to apologize, she smiled, putting her hands on her hips. So, who are you? Oh, right. I forgot you didn't know. The name's Nana Shimura. And nice to meet you. Nice to officially meet you too. Oh, officially? Well, yeah. I've known you for months now. You have? Sure thing. Shame we have to meet like this though. Midoriya frowned. He still didn't understand who this person was and why she knew him. She looked like a hero, dressed in a costume with a cape and everything. But Midoriya knew everything about heroes, and he didn't recognize this one from anywhere. If she knew him, then she must be local, but… Oh, wait a second, she's dead. You're a ghost too. Midoriya realized. Took you that long to figure it out? I thought you were supposed to be some sort of analysis wizard, kid. Sorry. No need to keep apologizing, she insisted, floating over to him and patting him harshly on the back. You remind me of Tashinori. Whose? All Might, you dummy. All Might. Midoriya yelled, almost jumping through the wall again. Yeah. I was the one who gave one for all to him. Midoriya's eyes widened at the explanation. Why, you're the 7th user. And you're the 9th, she acknowledged. But this isn't a good state for the current user of one for all to be in now, is it? Nana continued, indicating to Midoriya's broken body. Midoriya's sudden euphoria quickly faded. Yeah? You acted without thinking. Jumping into the building like that to help little Kichi was a reckless thing to do, she said, pointing at the numerous cards the girl had made him. I'm sorry. But it's exactly what I would have done. Midoriya couldn't help but smile. You're a good choice for the 9th user. Toshi did well. Thank you. But don't do it again, she scolded him, her temperament changing like lightning. I don't know if I'll even get the chance. No, she yelled, punching his arm almost playfully. No thinking like that. You will get out of this coma, and we're going to help you do it. One for all has been cultivating inside of us, passed from one generation to the next. Our bodies may be gone, but our spirits remain in you, she explained, pointing to Midoriya's chest, and then that of his own body. We managed to push you out into reality, so you can continue on your path of being a hero, despite your condition. Midoriya wanted to thank her, but he was so shocked and confused that he just couldn't utter the words. But you're getting stronger. Back at the USJ, you managed to harness this one for all to its full potential beyond your body. I didn't think you would be able to do it, considering you've only had the power for a few months. I became solid for a moment. Midoriya remembered. Sure did. But it took a lot out of you, Nana recalled. I couldn't wake up for days. No, and that's the recoil. It's dangerous, but not fatal if you're careful. Midoriya gulped. Okay, I'll bear that in mind. But you're more powerful than us, kid. You still have a body. Something which you can return to and recharge in a way. She put her finger to her lip thoughtfully. After a moment, she added, next time you feel the need to do something like that, don't use 100% of your power. One for all isn't just a one-trick pony. Look at All Might, for instance. He is using one for all constantly, but not 100%. Let the power course through you, not just focusing it in one spot and hoping for the best. Midoriya furrowed his brow as he considered this. Hey, think of your egg in the microwave thing you told All Might about back along. Nana remembered. To keep it from exploding, all you need to do is turn down the wattage. Don't turn one for all on like SWH, 100% all at once, or else the egg will explode, and your spirit will be sent flying back here. All Might had tried to tell him that back then too, Midoriya thought, but it made so much more sense through Nana's words. He supposed that she did have some experience teaching a one-for-all user before. Then again, All Might didn't have the problems Midoriya seemed to be facing. Considering her words, Midoriya turned and hovered just above the ground by his bedside. In deep concentration, he closed his eyes and breathed deeply, imagining the power that he held within him rising to the surface, not surging out, but just bubbling there. Barely 5% of his power. Yeah, that's it, kid, he heard Nana say encouragingly. Really? What was he doing? But then all of a sudden he wasn't hovering anymore. He was standing, really standing. He looked down at his hands, which were still green and translucent, but they seemed so much more real now. Heart thumping in his chest, he reached down to his backpack, grasped the handle, and lifted it into the air. It was such a trivial thing, but it felt like he'd just lifted a building. Nana was whooping and soaring around the room, doing celebratory laps. Suddenly, a shooting pain shot through his head. He dropped the backpack and lost control of One for All. The world went dark as he unintentionally fell back into his body. He heard Nana's echoing laughter. Good job, kid. A little practice and you'll be back in the game in no time. Try not to freak anyone out though. It's probably best that you keep this a secret for now. Until then, I just want you to know that we're always here for you, you'll never be alone. Midoriya heeded Nana's warnings. Walking into class 1A and unceremoniously announcing that student 18 actually was a ghost and had been there the entire time was more likely to give someone a heart attack than to do any good whatsoever. But that didn't mean he couldn't have some fun with it. So, I think that I've been using a minutely small percentage of One for All to be a spirit. That would explain the shivering thing and how I can occasionally move some objects if I try really hard, Midoriya explained to no one in particular. It wasn't like anyone could hear him. He wasn't sure if that was even possible yet. But now, I've figured out how to control the output of One for All a little more, so I can increase how intangible I am at a given point. I reckon I'm a lot weaker than I would be in my body. 5% or so can allow me to easily touch and move small objects, but I think at 5% in my body, my strength would be vaguely enhanced or... So, who else is super pumped for the summer camp? Kirishima asked, throwing a fist in the air in excitement. You know it. Kaminari replied, filming the conversation once again. But you've got to pass the exams first, Jiro pointed out. She had a decent score on the midterms, if Midoriya remembered correctly. He thought he did pretty well too. Not that he was actually able to write his answers down or hand his non-existent paper in. I barely took any notes this semester. Kaminari and Mina exclaimed simultaneously. Although, they seemed to have very different attitudes. Don't worry guys, if you study hard, I'm sure you'll push through. Midoriya encouraged them. He kept forgetting no one could hear him. I can help catch you up to speed for more difficult topics if you want, offered Yaoyorozu. You're the best, Yamamo, they yelled cheerfully. But, when it comes to the practical I'm afraid I'm no help at all, she added. Kaminari was still filming. Maybe Midoriya could help take their minds of it all for a while? Still sitting in seat 18, he waited for Kaminari's phone to pan past him accidentally. As soon as it did, Midoriya let his percentage of One for All increase just the tiniest bit, just enough for his green figure to flicker before them. Hey, did you guys see that? Asked Hagakure. Huh, the invisible girl saw me, Midoriya muttered. See what? Mina replied, distracted from Yaoyorozu's bubbly personality as she planned their study group for a moment. Over there, she continued, by the empty desk, I swear I saw something. Maybe it's the ghost. Uraraka suggested. Midoriya knew she was joking, but it held more truth than she realized. Wait, let me check my camera, said Kaminari, stopping filming for a moment and playing back his most recent recording. The class gathered around him as he skipped unimportant conversations he had filmed, right up until the moment Hagakure spoke up. There, she yelled, pointing at the screen. Kaminari frowned and skipped back a couple of seconds, pausing the video in the perfect moment, only to see. "Oh my god, it's the ghost!" Uraraka exclaimed, jumping up and down. "No way," Jiro murmured. Midoriya grinned. He held his hand in the air in mid-wave, sitting in his desk. It was the first time he saw what he looked like as a ghost. He couldn't recognize himself. His entire silhouette was blurry and almost disfigured. "Okay, no one can tell me that's a camera glitch," Kaminari yelled, holding his phone away from him like it was haunted. "Seriously, that can't even be a trick of the light. That's just freaky," Jiro added, curiously staring at the picture. "It's definitely a person," acknowledged Azui. "Or maybe the result of someone's quirk." Ribbit. "But no one here can create illusions like that, right?" Zero questioned. "Well, I can," said Midoriya. He didn't realize he still had enough of one for all activated to allow those words to finally leave his mouth. Everyone screamed. "Shut up!" Bakugo yelled, who had been talking to Kirishima about study sessions. "Okay, who said that?" Kaminari screamed, starting to film once more. "Whose voice was that?" Uraraka exclaimed, "I didn't recognize it." "Ah, whoops," Midoriya muttered. "They didn't hear him that time. I'm going to have a migraine tonight." "Everybody calm down," Ida ordered, chopping the air with his hands. "We will end up disturbing Class B next door." "Bitch," yelled Kaminari. "Class B? I bet someone's playing a trick on us." "Great, now I'm back to a trick of the light." "Does anyone there have a quirk which could do something like this, though?" pondered Yaoyorozu, who had finished making a list of tea brands to offer people at her study group. "Well, there's that poltergeist girl," Mina remembered. "Could she do something like this?" "It sounded like a boy's voice though, Ribbit," added Azui. "I bet it's Monoma," Kirishima exclaimed. "He's always had it out for us. He could just copy someone's quirk to do all this stuff, so not manly." "Now, let's not make any unjust accusations," Ida interjected. "Jumping to conclusions about our fellow Hero Corps students would be unbecoming of." "Yeah, guys, you're just overthinking all this," Shinso sighed as he reached Uraraka's side. "Just leave it, and if something weird happens again then you could talk to Class B. It's not like I've been here long, so I don't know what happened between your classes, but it seems like the best way to avoid a fight." Ojiro gave him a look that clearly stated that Shinso wouldn't know how to avoid a fight if the answer was staring him in the face. "I'm sorry guys. I didn't mean to cause so much trouble." Midoriya tried to explain, but he couldn't figure out how to get his voice to work again. One by one, his classmates settled down and eventually left to have lunch. Midoriya thought about following them, but hesitated. He felt extraordinarily guilty and desperately hoped that his class wouldn't do anything reckless involving Class B. They hated them enough as it was. Sighing, he phased through the closed door and wandered through the hallways of UA. He tried floating above people's heads to avoid making them shiver, but for some reason he felt so weighed down. Midoriya ended up standing in the middle of the corridor, letting students walk right through him as he sadly considered what he would do next. But that decision was made for him when, in the blink of an eye, the world went dark and the familiar weight of his body pinned him to the stuffy hospital bed. "Wait, how did I get back here so quickly?" he wondered. "He doesn't seem to be doing it again," Midoriya heard a voice mutter by his ear. "Could he be trying to wake up?" replied a gruff man to his right. What's going on?" He tried to leave his body again, but it was no use, he was completely trapped. "His heart rate seems to be increasing," acknowledged the kind voice of an elderly lady. After a moment, the metaphorical chains holding him inside his shell of a body faded away, and slowly but surely, Midoriya carefully rose up and out of his body. He blinked, looking down at the small crowd of people surrounding his bed. Mr. Aizawa was closing the cap of an eyedrop bottle. Beside him was a man dressed in a red and white suit, whom Midoriya recognized as Vlad King, Class 1 BS homeroom teacher. Beside them was none other than Recovery Girl and Netsu himself. "Very peculiar," said the principal, perching on one of the chairs beside his body. Whether this was a coincidence or a deliberate action, it is apparent that Midoriya is not in a completely vegetative state, or else he would not be able to use his quirk. I used my quirk? Midoriya mumbled. Oh, but of course. I used earlier when Kaminari was filming. Could they have seen that? Did I use so much that some of one for all came out of my body as well? I thought I was only at 5%. That doesn't negate the fact that he's been in a coma for 4 months, Mr. Aizawa reminded them. The nurses have told us that something like this has happened before on the same day as the USJ incident. It seems like nothing has changed in his condition, Vlad King sighed, arms folded as he gazed down at Midoriya's body with an air of sadness in his eyes. No, no, no! Midoriya exclaimed. He thought of Nana's advice and tried desperately to make himself visible, to be heard. I'm right here, please, please. Come on, one for all, why isn't this working? Maybe it's time we concluded that he isn't going to wake up, Recovery Girl said, looking at the floor solemnly. Please. I'm right here, I am awake. He has missed 4 months of classwork, Mr. Aizawa told the principal. We've all seen what he did in the entrance exam. His quirk is powerful, but too self-destructive. He hasn't had the practice the other first years have experienced. Even if he does wake up, I don't know if he will be able to catch up with the others. Why can't you hear me? Midoriya sobbed, regretting the trick he had pulled earlier. It was as if he ran out of energy, and now, when he needed it more than ever, one for all was just beyond his grasp. I don't want to give up on him quite yet, said Nezu, before turning to Midoriya's body and addressing him directly. Midoriya, I have faith in you. I believe that you will wake up one day. However, I cannot just dismiss Mr. Aizawa's warnings. He sighed deeply as Midoriya watched on, his heart pounding, something which was reflected by his ECG, which beeped furiously. Remain calm, he told him. I know you can hear me. The electrocardiogram reflects how panicked you must be feeling at the moment. I don't want to expel you. We could never refuse a space to such a heroic person. I am afraid that if you don't wake up soon, then we will have to reconsider your future at UA. No. Please, I'm trying but I just can't. What is your verdict, Principal Nezu? Questioned Recovery Girl, who just couldn't look at Midoriya's motionless body anymore. I will ensure that this boy becomes a hero, he insisted, to Midoriya's relief and gratitude. Of course, Nezu knew about One for All, so no matter what, All Might would be teaching Midoriya heroics once he woke up, if he woke up. He was just glad that Nezu would be lending a hand. But, Nezu sighed. If he doesn't wake up by the beginning of next semester, then we will have to reconsider the path at which he gets there. Kaminari's constant filming was annoying as hell. Well, at least that was Bakugo's undying opinion. That dunce face wondered why he kept bombing classes whilst he focused so much on some stupid videos that would never amount to anything worthwhile. The name Dunce Face was becoming more and more fitting as the semester went by. What was even more frustrating was all the nonsense that they babbled on about to do with this student, and it was freaking annoying. Did he mention it was annoying? Stupid Deku. He just had to go and throw himself into a collapsing building of all things. Seriously? That was how he decided to go. The quirkless loser just couldn't do anything right. How did he even get into UA? Bakugo wasn't even able to beat the answer out of him because he went and got himself into a coma before he had the chance. He must have cheated, done something. How else could that worthless loser have gotten 7th place in the entrance exam? Unless he did have a quirk. The very thought made Bakugo's blood boil. Could Deku have really been holding out on him for all those years? He must have thought he was so much better than him, that he wasn't even worth his quirk. Bakugo didn't care what the answer was. Either way, if the nerd ever woke up, he was so dead. Unfortunately, that didn't seem like an option he will ever be faced with. He'd heard news from Inko when she occasionally dropped around for a visit. Bakugo's mum insisted that she would be lonely without Deku around, and that she would appreciate the company. Whatever, at least Bakugo had Kirishima's study sessions as an excuse to miss those visits. Although, this time, he couldn't escape it. Not that he actually cared, but today was July the 15th. He didn't need that old hag's reminders, he knew it was Deku's birthday. Not that he actually cared, the date was just ingrained into his mind. They'd known each other for too long. He'd never visited Deku before. There was always an excuse waiting for him, A way out of having to lug himself into the hospital and stand over his pathetic body for a good 10 minutes of his time that could have been spent doing literally anything else. His visit wouldn't make a difference anyway. It wasn't like he'd just wake up because of it. But he would go anyway, because Auntie Inko wouldn't have it any other way. Not that he actually cared. Poor Izuku, Katsuki's mum muttered as they looked down at him, whilst arranging a selection of flowers in a vase beside his bed. Bakugo wouldn't look at him. He just stared at his phone and hoped one of those extras would give him a reasonable excuse to get the hell out of there. "How do the doctors say he's doing?" asked his dad. "Nothing much has changed. They mentioned something happening a few weeks ago, but it wasn't anything that hadn't happened before. His condition is really the same as always," Inko explained, stroking her son's frail hand in the process. "Did they say he could hear us?" "Well, they insist that it's probable, but I suppose that it's hard to believe." Bakugo kept feeling this freaking annoying draft blowing past him. The window was closed, so he guessed it was coming from either the air vent or through that tiny gap under the door. It just made him feel even more uncomfortable. "How is Yue Katsuki?" Inko questioned with a sudden brightness of her tone as she quickly changed the subject. Bakugo didn't reply immediately, so his mother hit him around the head. "Fine," he yelled. "It's fine." "How are your classmates getting along?" she continued. "Fine." "Give her a better answer than that, Katsuki," his mum exclaimed. "Shut up," he retorted, but couldn't think of a better response than that. "I've met Ida and Uraraka," Inko told them. "Such lovely kids. They seem so enthusiastic about school and around Izuku." Bakugo narrowed his eyes. When the hell did Four Eyes and Round Face start visiting Deku? What a team those three would make. 3 types of irritating rolled up into a neat package that he would more than happily mail to the son than be associated with. If they knew that he knew Deku, he would never hear the end of it. "Katsuki doesn't mention any names at home," Mitsuki replied. "I started to wonder if he had any friends at all, which wouldn't be a surprise." "What the hell do you mean by that?" But then Kirishima came around to drag Katsuki out with a whole group of them to go to the arcade. Honestly, I don't know why they put up with him. "You hag. Lower your voice, think of Izuku. The freaking hypocrite." To the Bakugo's surprise, Inko suddenly burst into tears. "Oh, Inko. I'm sorry, apologize," the hypocrite yelled. "And no, don't worry about me," Inko stammered, trying to dry her eyes with her sleeve. "I just can't help but think about everything Izuku's missing out on," she sobbed. "Why don't we head down to the hospital's cafe and grab something to eat?" Masaru suggested. But what about? "Katsuki will keep Izuku company in the meantime," Mitsuki insisted. "What? No." His mother glared at him, daring him to oppose her. Katsuki just growled and turned back to his phone. At least he'd be left in some peace and quiet for a few minutes. "Come on, Inko," she said, helping her friend to her feet and skirting her to the door, flanked by her husband as they left Katsuki behind. As soon as they were gone, Bakugo leaned back into his chair, tried to shake off that blithering draft and scrolled through Hero News absent-mindedly for a good while. He didn't have anything better to do. But the beeping noise of all those machines Deku was attached to was starting to get on his nerves. He glanced up at his motionless, frail body, resting his eyes on him for the first time in months. Why the hell did he have to be so dim and reckless? Bakugo had almost been looking forward to crushing that nerd at school, putting him back in his place. He'd gotten into UA, sure, but he didn't think he'd be staying there long. They'd probably send him packing as soon as they realized how useless he really was. Not that it mattered much now anyway. There was no way they'd let him back in, even if he did wake up. He was too far behind. He might have been irritatingly smart in middle school, but that was only because he had nothing better to do than study. Besides, Bakugo often beat him anyway. Now he'd been unconscious for months and would probably even be beaten by Dunce Face in any exam he took. Bakugo averted his eyes, only for them to meet the array of cards beside the flowers his mother had gotten him. A few of them were handmade, clearly by someone an awful lot younger than him, with crude drawings of stick figures and poor handwritten messages around them. "You're my hero. TSK. The guy might have been half dead, but at least he did something vaguely worthwhile. He could admit to that at the very least. Because of the positioning of one of the cards, he could just see the writing inside it. He didn't read the message but recognized the handwriting immediately. For eyes. Did Aizawa make the class president visit you? Bakugo said aloud, mainly because he didn't think it would make a difference if he kept his thoughts in his head or not. Must have dragged Pink Cheeks along with him too. I guess that answers why she stopped blabbering on about Student 18 with the other imbeciles. He let silence fill the hospital room once more, a void filled only by that bloody beeping sound. Bakugo turned his gaze back to Deku and let his thoughts pour out into the open. I don't know how you got into UA, he began. Whether you have a quirk or not, there's something you didn't tell me. So, when you wake up, you're gonna give me all those answers? You get it, Deku? I don't care if they let you back in, but you still owe me an explanation. I can't believe you didn't even make it into my class, but they still talk about you and you managed to irritate me backhandedly nevertheless. Dunce's face keeps going on about freaking student bet. He would shut up if he knew you got yourself into a coma, of all things. I mean, come on. That's just pathetic. No response, only the beeping filled his ears. He couldn't bring himself to say anything else for a while. Not that he was upset about that demed nerd, not that he actually cared. Why should he? So, you've got to wake up, got it, Deku? Wake up so I can punch you in the face for being such a freaking idiot. 'Cause I'd get in trouble if I did it whilst you're in a coma. But that's the only reason why I haven't yet. His parents came back not long after, each practically supporting Inko as they walked through the door. They didn't stay for much longer. All the while, Bakugo just couldn't shake that freaking draft. It was like it was hugging him, god damn it. Midoriya ensured that he was there promptly as his classmates were loaded onto the bus. If he didn't follow them to the location of their summer camp, how would he ever be able to find it? It was increasingly irritating that he couldn't sit down. He had to focus intently every time the bus moved, making sure he was floating inside of it as it turned around every bend and corner of the road. You better be documenting this trip, Kaminari. Mina yelled over the various conversations being batted back and forth across the bus. Kaminari held his camera phone over the back of his seat and zoomed in on Ishido's pink face in response. She pulled numerous silly faces in retaliation. Do you know how much further it is? Mineta called out. He was fidgeting in his seat, clearly desperate for a toilet break. We'll be stopping the bus for you to stretch your legs in a couple of minutes, Mr. Aizawa announced. Class B will be driving ahead to a different pit stop. Oh, thank goodness, I didn't think it was possible for a bus to move so quickly through these lanes, Midoriya sighed, struggling to keep up with the coach. Midoriya's ghost body was strange. He couldn't feel exhaustion like he had felt whilst he hauled rubbish off Dagoba Beach. His muscles didn't ache and complain as he pushed himself. Instead, the only warning that he received suggesting that he was overdoing it was a strange sensation that almost seemed to pull him backwards. Like a tugging that was desperately trying to bring him back to his body. Midoriya could feel tiredness, something which came over him after a long day's work, alerting him that it was time to return to his body for his brain to get some rest. However, it wasn't like he was using any part of his body other than that in any kind of physical exercise. The only thing that substituted for that was Dr. Adachi's quirk, which contracted the muscles of Midoriya's comatose body to keep him as fit and healthy as possible. Despite all this, it was evident that keeping up with the bus was putting some kind of strain on his ghostly self. The pounding of a distant headache gave him the warning that he was reaching his limit. That limit of quirk usage was not something new, but it definitely wasn't the same as it had been back at the USJ, where one hit of one for all rendered him unconscious for days. He was becoming stronger, at least his spirit was, whilst the other, much more alive and able UA students trained. Their abilities, Midoriya was left with another method of learning, something which mainly involved trial and error. He had the previous one for all users by his side at least. He'd met Nana several times, who seemed to enjoy their occasional conversations. Other than that, the others appeared more frequently as voices, jabbering on at him for overdoing it in the back of his mind, rather than appearing to him as a ghost like Nana had. They helped him learn the basics of One for All, string moving it around his ghostly apparition to make himself more or less tangible. His voice, however, well, that was another problem entirely. He just couldn't get it to work. No matter how hard he tried, he could never reach out to the people he so desperately wanted to contact, to tell them that it was okay, and that there was no need to shed more tears for him. But he just couldn't get it right. It frightened him. He didn't want to appear to his friends and family as nothing more than a literal ghost without being able to explain. The whole thing just made his head throb even more. He wanted to go to sleep. If only he had his body. He could just sit down and the bus journey could have been as easy as bus journeys should be. He glanced enviously at Todoroki, who had managed to fall asleep, his head resting against the window even as the bus rattled along the rutted roads. All of a sudden, the coach took a sharp, right-angled corner and Midoriya phased through both Ida, Shinso, and the wall of the bus. Ah, shoot, he sighed as he started to catch up with them again. He didn't manage to get very far before Class 1B's bus drove right through his ghostly apparition. 5 members though, Kendo, Monoma cried. 5 members, and they say they're so much better than us. It doesn't matter who failed the exams or who didn't, Kendo retorted. Yeah, don't be such a hypocrite, Monoma, exclaimed a guy wearing a blue and white headband. Whoops, sorry. Midoriya apologized to no one in particular as he realized where he was. He's right though, interjected a guy with short green hair and pincers on his face. Class A thinks they're so freaking. Don't you even start, Kamikiri, their class president yelled back at him. Midoriya felt extremely out of place. Despite not actually making it into Class 1A because of his accident, Midoriya always found himself hovering around the class he was meant to be in. Because of this, he hadn't really spent much time around Class 1B. He knew several students, Monoma, for starters, then Kendo because of her friendly attitude towards the rest of Class A, and then Tetsu because of his involvement in the sports festival with Kirishima. The only other face he could match a name to was Ibara Shizuki, the girl with the vine hair who defeated Kaminari. Hey, whoever just opened a window, close it, exclaimed another student, with lots of long, brown hair and a pair of square glasses similar to Ida's. Midoriya was about to leave to catch up with Class A again when another horrendously sharp corner caught him off guard. Ahaha! Kinoko! What happened? There was this green light, exclaimed the girl with a bob and a block fringe so long that it covered her eyes. It was shaped like a person, I swear. Ah, whoops, Midoriya muttered, rubbing his head as he got up and floated beside the girl. The bus had screeched to a halt with her sudden exclamation. I must have activated my quirk by accident, Midoriya pondered. I guess that explains why I hit the back of the bus instead of flying through it again. Is everything okay there, Komori? Asked Vlad King as he turned to face his students from the front of the bus. Someone else is here, Mr. Vlad, the girl, Kinoko Komori, explained. What are you talking about? Asked a horned girl with a thick American accent. Shishida? Vlad called out. The guy with all the fur and glasses from earlier stood up and sniffed the air. I can't smell any stranger, Sir Vlad, he replied. But I must admit to feeling a strange presence for the last few minutes. Oh no, a sensory quirk? Midoriya guessed. I'm so sorry, I didn't mean to cause any trouble. No one here can make lights like that, right? Asked Kendo. Monoma, it better not be you. Tetsu yelled from across the bus. I can only copy another quirk for 5 minutes, and I wouldn't have been able to touch anyone other than the people on this bus for hours. Monoma retorted, clearly angry about the accusation. Are you sure you weren't just seeing things? Yeah, did you spore a weird mushroom or something? Do you think it could have been someone from Class A? Nah, look, their bus turned off. Wait, what? Midoriya exclaimed, phasing through Shishida to look outside the bus. Sure enough, his coach had disappeared down some other narrow road. He'd lost them. He sighed and floated back into Bus B. At least they were all going to the same location. He'd catch up with them all later. Something is amiss, Sir Vlad. Shishida cried as Midoriya returned. Perhaps his sensory quirk reacted a little differently to Midoriya touching him. Mr. Vlad simply grunted and turned back to the front of the bus. If something happens again, let me know. We're not far from the lodge now anyway. Midoriya gave a sigh of relief as the bus started to move. Maybe it is the ghost of Class A? Midoriya stared. The girl who'd suggested the idea was very pale-looking, like a ghost herself, with short, silvery hair, who held her arms in a strange position, even whilst sitting, with her elbows tucked in tight to her body, but her lower arms raised, kind of like a zombie. "Ghost, huh?" said one of the other girls with long, green-tinged hair. "Where'd you hear about that, Reiko?" They had divulged me of a wistful figure who appears to shadow the members of their class. One who rarely appears in a visible form, although they presume it to be a constant presence within school hours, she replied. With our rooms being situated side by side, they had initially concluded that the green figure was a trick being played on them by one of us. Having encountered me in the sports festival, one member of our sister class questioned whether I was responsible, with my quirk being named Poltergeist after all. "Yeah, but it's got nothing to do with actual ghosts appearing, right?" Reiko shook her head timidly. Theories about Midoriya were thrown back and forth for the rest of their journey, even whilst they stopped for a toilet break. The conversations didn't sway from the matter. Midoriya was absolutely relieved when the lodge finally came into view. Although, other than Mr. Aizawa, Class A was nowhere to be seen. "Where's your class, Eraserhead?" questioned Vlad King, echoing Midoriya's thoughts as the rest of Class B listened in intently. "Training," he answered bluntly. "Already," said Midoriya. "They'll be finished in the next few hours. Go ahead and let your class set up and have food." Vlad King seemed a little confused but didn't question it. Midoriya, however, had already been distracted by something else. The heroes that were holding the summer camp were a famous four-person team that specialized in mountain rescues, the Wild Pussycats. After gushing about them to himself for a good few minutes, his attention was caught by yet another surprise, a young boy with shaggy, black hair and a red hat with little golden horns. He looked positively repulsed by the Class B students who were happily pulling their luggage out of their coach. "How pathetic, to want to be hero," he snarled to himself as he followed one of the Wild Pussycats, Mandalay, back into the lodge. Midoriya wondered what he'd think of him, who had already practically killed himself for the cause. And so, the ghost took it upon himself to follow the boy around, partly because of how lonely he looked, partly because he wanted to get away from Class B, but mostly because his curiosity had gotten the better of him. Midoriya just couldn't understand why someone wouldn't want to be, or at least respect heroes. Something must have happened to him. It was the only explanation. Class A trudged across the threshold of the summer lodge as the sun began to set. They looked exhausted. Midoriya was glad he'd decided to treat the camp as his own version of training, seeing how long he could remain away from his body and hoping his teleportation trick worked to get all the way back once he ran out of time. If he hadn't, he wouldn't have been able to laugh at the sheer joy that spread across Kaminari's and Kirishima's faces once they were told that they were still getting food. As they ate, Midoriya kept an eye on little Koda. But not long after, he saw the boy sneak away from the group and wander into the forest. Midoriya, having literally nothing better to do than watch his friends eat the food that he so desperately wanted to try himself, ended up following him across the valley and up a well-trodden trail up the mountainside. Koda had no idea that someone was there, listening as he ranted to himself about heroes and villains killing each other for no reason. About how they cared so much about quirks and waving in front of the cameras. How if his parents weren't heroes, they would still be there for him. And as Midoriya succumbed to the darkness and his spirit was pulled back to his body, all he could think of were the people he had left behind, leaving them as all but dead, trapped like his own body was a prison. But somehow, as he fell asleep, rather than putting him off his dream, it simply fueled his determination. He would find a way out of this coma, so he could chase away worries with a smile, so he could save lives, and so no one would have to leave their loved ones behind. Midoriya was very proud of himself. You see, whilst the rest of his classmates struggled through the torture that was quirk training, he was by no means slacking off. First of all, Midoriya discovered that, since he didn't really have a body, the laws of physics didn't seem to apply to him. He could be wherever he so wished, as long as he could picture himself in the place in question, he could teleport to and fro. Moreover, Midoriya had extended the maximum time limit away from his body to over 10 hours, a PRD of time which included the occasionally upping of this power usage. He spent time in the woods, away from everyone else, who were far too focused on training to notice the distant flicker of green lightning anyway, doing his own version of a training regime. He finally managed to pinpoint how much power he needed to make his voice heard and how much he needed to be visible. Then how much he required to become tangible. The higher the percentage of one for all he used, the more solid his ghostly apparition became, and the bigger the headache he received when he finally let himself snap back to his real body. He could resist that pull, but at the mercy of his health. Dr. Adachi was very worried about him. Midoriya overheard conversations between him and the other nurses about Midoriya's deteriorating condition. He was overdoing it. However, he found it extremely interesting how much his body responded to his training. It made Midoriya shiver. Do ghosts shiver? At the thought of All Might's warnings of his arms and legs blowing off if he used too much power before he was ready for it. But maybe, just maybe, he could use this and finally wake up. But he knew that it would come with time. Before, he had been so impatient, desperate to lift his head and feel again, to be free of the cage of his motionless self. But as the months went by, he became more accustomed to his new way of life, if it was even life at all. He had learnt so much about his quirk, things that even All Might couldn't have known. He had met new people, seen such incredible things. And Midoriya was scared about what would happen when he finally woke up. He'd have to build all these relationships from scratch. Would he tell everyone about his ghostly self? What would they think? Would they be mad that he hadn't tried harder to contact them? Would they? No, he couldn't think like that. One step at a time. He was patient. He had until the end of the summer break to wake up. He planned to use that time to its fullest. Perhaps, at the end of the summer camp, he would finally talk to his classmates and explain what had happened to him. How Student 18 had been there the entire time. Bellies are filled and plates are clean. Pixie Bob exclaimed, "Now it's time for the totally awesome test of courage." Ashido interjected excitably, bunching the air. "Sorry to break it to you," said Mr. Aizawa, expertly wrapping his capture tape around 5 of his students. "Remedial group, you've got your extra lessons with me now." "You've got to be kidding me." Midoriya chuckled as he watched on. He'd been taking it lightly that day. It was the 3rd day of training, and for once he considered the feelings of poor Dr. Adachi. He didn't know exactly what he'd been doing to his body unintentionally, but it was really frightening the hospital staff. He thought taking a day off occasionally would be better for everyone. He felt quite bad missing a day of training, but perhaps this test of courage would serve as the perfect opportunity for his ghost to have some fun whilst testing his palpability. "Jiro!" Kaminari called as he was literally dragged away. "Document it for me." "Why am I the backup vlogger?" Jiro ummed, pulling out her phone anyway. "I hate scary things." "Great!" Shinso exclaimed. "I drew the short straw. Someone subage with me." "We've got an odd number, so someone had to be alone," Uraraka replied. "Eyebags, SWH with me." Bakugo yelled, pointing at Todoroki. "No switching." Ragdoll contradicted. "Get ready to have your pants scared off, class." Tetsu yelled as his class started to make their way into the forest to take their positions. Midoriya saw this as the perfect opportunity to make him eat his words. About half of Class B screamed and one girl legitimately lost her head. "What was that?" one exclaimed. "Oh my god, Setsuna, are you okay?" asked the boy with the blue and white headband. "The ghost is back," said Setsuna as she reattached her head. "Whoa, wait, ghost!" Uraraka exclaimed. "Yeah, your ghost follows us now," Pony replied, her hand on her heart. Midoriya laughed. He'd only just made himself visible for a few precious moments. Looks like he could easily win this competition for Class A. "Jiro!" Hagakure yelled excitably, "Were you filming?" "Come on guys," said Ragdoll. "Save the scaring for when the competition begins. Now, get into the forest so we can start." Class B were a whole lot less confident venturing into the forest after that. Midoriya, who was more eager to be a scare than to be unintentionally frightened by Class B, quickly followed them down the dirt path and into the shadow-shrouded forest. Under any other circumstance, Midoriya would be as terrified of the screams filling the forest as the people letting those screams out of their mouths. However, as a ghost, it wasn't like anything could hurt him. So, actually, who is that? There was a girl there, wandering through the trees. She was someone Midoriya didn't recognize, definitely not from Class A or Class B. She was dressed in a middle school outfit and wearing some kind of black mask, which she was pulling at in obvious discomfort, or perhaps just distaste. And she was carrying a knife. Smoke filled the air. It mingled with a gray gas which couldn't have been natural. It seeped through the forest as the girl almost skipped along in a gleeful fashion. Midoriya's mind raced. Villains. That had to be the answer. Suddenly the yells filling the woodland brought with them an unsettling truth. They were under attack. The students were scattered across the forest because of the test of courage. But through the panic, Midoriya could only see one course of action. Because Kota was alone. And Midoriya was the only one who knew where he could be. Kota stood, sweat pouring down his face as he watched the blue flames burn across the forest. He was alone, shaking, terrified. He heard Mandalay's telepathy call to him, telling him to run home. But he was so scared that his feet just wouldn't move. I just came up here for the view, and what do I find? A face that wasn't on the list. Kota turned in shock, only to come face to face with a towering man in a black cloak and a gray mask covered in holes. Kota ran as the villain complained loudly about the mask, which he quickly tossed to the ground. As the recognition of the man registered in his brain, Kota continued to run and run, but the familiar villain didn't follow. Still frightened, Kota slowed to a halt and gazed over his shoulder. There, holding back Muscular, was a figure, colored neon green, with electricity buzzing around him. "What the?" Muscular yelled. So surprised by the encounter, the villain was pushed back. But as soon as he realized that one of those hero students must have come to a timely rescue, he leered and applied his power. The green boy cried out in shock and was quickly overcome. He disappeared in a second flash of light. Muscular toppled over and fell to the ground. "Where'd you go, kid? I'm not finished with you yet." Kota wasn't sure if he was talking to him or the strange person who had come to his rescue, but nevertheless, the exclamation only added to the fear building up in his chest, sending tears streaming down his face. "Run, Kota," a voice cried. Kota didn't know where it had come from. It wasn't Mandalay's, but he didn't hesitate to trust it. Stumbling over the rocks, Kota ran down the mountainside and towards the flaming trees. They seemed more inviting than what was behind him. "Kota!" Kota stopped, breathing his throat dry. He was alone in the forest, no one in sight. It wasn't Mandalay's voice, that was... "Kota, where are you?" That was the green boy from earlier. "He's alive? Did he defeat Muscular?" "I'm over here," he replied, shaking, worried that it was another villain. Instead of his savior running from the trees, he appeared before him in a clash of green lightning. His figure flickered like a glitch on a TV screen. His voice sounded wrong, distant, and in a strange way, almost robotic. Kota didn't recognize him. Partly because his figure was blurry, hard to see, and partly because, well, Kota was sure that this guy was never at the training camp to begin with. "Are you okay?" Kota stammered. He didn't look okay. He was almost transparent. He could just see the trees through his glowing, green self. His feet didn't even touch the ground. "Who was this?" "Don't worry about me," he replied. It was hard to make out the words. They were barely more than a whisper. "Let me help you get back to the lodge." Kota nodded uncertainly. When he held out his hand for Kota to take it, he hesitated and took a step back. "Who are you?" he questioned. "Why did you save me? You don't even know me." "Because that's what it means to be a hero." Through his tears, Kota gaped up at the flickering man, his hero. A little more surely, he reached forward and grasped his hand. It was cold, lacking any comfort of body heat, like he was grasping nothing but the night air. His hand seemed more solid than the rest of him. As he pulled Kota through the trees, his figure seemed to glitch more and more. He slowed and his floating form started to sink closer and closer to the ground. Why you're not okay? Kota exclaimed as the lodge came into view. You're hurt. Don't worry, he replied. His voice was even more distant now, like he was fading away. Mr. Aizawa. Kota turned towards the clearing just outside the house. Eraserhead was there, pinning down a villain covered in scars. Arriving at the same time as him were 4 students that he did recognize. The exclamation from the boy with glasses surprised the teacher, and the villain pulled away from his grip. He melted into nothing more than a pile of mud with a menacing smile. See ya later, he laughed as he crumbled away. Mr. Aizawa, what was that? Cried the short boy with purple hair. Get inside, I'll be back soon, Eraserhead began. He turned, about to run into the forest when he saw Kota beside the green man. He froze. Kota, get away. To Kota's surprise, Eraserhead's scarf was thrown across the clearing and wrapped itself around the body of his hero. Wait. It's okay. Kota tried to tell them. But suddenly, the green figure disappeared, and the scarf fell to the floor. Another villain? Stammered the student with the tail. Get inside. Eraserhead ordered once more. They didn't hesitate that time. Midoriya, kid, what the hell do you think you're doing? A familiar voice cried. Midoriya stopped in his tracks as a purple figure faded into view. Nana. I have to help them, Midoriya began. The villains can't hurt me. I can. You've done enough, the fallen hero insisted. Don't you feel the tug back to your body? He couldn't deny it. It was stronger than anything, a blinding pain that pulsed through his ghostly apparition, like a rope tied around his waist, trying to pull him back to the hospital so far away. His head pounded. The pain actually transmitted to his spirit. That couldn't be good. You're giving yourself seizures, she cried. You could kill yourself. Just a little longer, I need to. You're being too reckless, just like Toshi. Where on earth did he find you? I. The last time you used one for all to that extent was at the USJ. You didn't wake up for days. I've been training. I know, you've done well. But the amount of power you used to defeat Muscular wasn't natural. You're using up your own life force now. Kid, don't you see? You could never wake up after this. Midoriya hesitated. He could hear the pain in her voice, feel the blinding pain that begged him to return to his body. He didn't want to die. He couldn't bear to leave his family, his friends, behind. But if he left now, would he be able to live with himself if something went wrong? One more thing. There's one more thing I have to do, then I'll go, I swear. What? Kaken, they're after Kaken. Muscular must have thought I was a student and tried to interrogate his location out of me. I have to warn him. Nana pulled at her hair. They fight. But hurry. Midoriya didn't hesitate. He turned off most of One for All to become intangible and soared through the trees. It took longer than it should have been to find him. What did I say? I'm your worst possible matchup. Bakugo snarled as Dark Shadow retreated back into Tokoyami. Thank you, I'm saved, he muttered, his voice sore from his screaming. We were struggling just to survive against that guy, Todoroki acknowledged. But in an instant, Kaken! What was that? Shoji exclaimed, almost dropping an unconscious Tsuburaba as he was transferred from Todoroki's back to the much stronger Shoji. Bakugo froze. He couldn't have heard that right? Kaken! The voice yelled again. Is that another villain? Questioned Tokoyami, clambering to his feet to ready himself for another fight. Must be, I don't recognize that voice, Todoroki replied, forgetting his distaste for using his flames as he thawed the ice forming over his left side. The group yelled out in fright as a green flash of light illuminated the path they were standing on. What is that? Said Shoji as the light quickly reformed into the shape of a person. Kaken, the villains, they're after you, the new figure exclaimed. What the hell? Bakugo started. Todoroki gazed, open-mouthed. Is that the ghost? Shoji finished. I don't know why, the ghost continued, but you're in danger. You have to get back to camp as quickly as possible. His voice was distorted, his figure blurry and facial features almost unrecognizable. But that name, Bakugo knew that nickname. There was only one person on Earth who still called him that. And he was as good as dead, so how? There's no time. I have to go, the ghost continued. My quirk has reached its limit. Please, I wish I could help you more, but let's just hope, Deku, that I'll be seeing you all again soon. What the hell? Todoroki breathed after a moment's stunned silence. Bakugo, do you know? Shoji began. Shut it. Bakugo retorted immediately. He tried to shout, but his voice was barely a whisper. A hiss that could have been lost to the crackling of the distant flames. You said the villains were after you. That Demed half and half continued. We should move. I said can it, he yelled, forgetting how much of a bad idea shouting was in the middle of the villains' raid. We'll figure out what the hell that was after we've gotten this freaking extra back to camp, he said, pointing at Tsuburaba on Shoji's back before turning on his heel and marching back through the forest, almost tripping on the ice that Todoroki had left lying around. It was so annoying that he wouldn't use his fire to melt it. It was just a freaking hindrance on everyone. Don't get in my way. If any villains decide to jump in, I'll blow them to bits. The others started trying to get some more information out of the explosive boy as they walked, desperate for answers about the strange apparition that was there 1 second, gone the next. But Bakugo wasn't listening, too engulfed in his thoughts. He should have been focusing more on the shadows slinking through the trees, leaping across the canopy, but he was distracted. For in that moment, a memory flashed across his mind's eye. 5 months ago. Stupid freaking nerd, Bakugo muttered aloud as he kicked the pebbles down the street, hands in his pockets and a snarl etched upon his expression. How the hell did he get into UA? There's something going on here. Ever since the sludge villain he's been different. What changed? What the hell made him worthy of freaking 7th place for the UA exams? He yelled, picking up the stone he'd been dribbling and tossing it into the sky with an explosion of anger. And, well, an actual explosion. He gritted his teeth, grinding them, hands clutched into fists, a vein popping out on his wrists as he marched furiously down the road. Passers-by swerved around him as he walked, seeing the obvious signs of someone who was not in a good mood and avoiding him as much as possible. He'd spent all his life with Deku trailing behind him, like no, not a puppy. Puppies can be trained, they have potential. Deku was nothing more than a bug. Something that he could squash if he wanted to. But like all blithering cockroaches, he just couldn't shake him off. And now that good-for-nothing Deku was following him all the way to the BSRD. He'd ruined his plans. Bakugo was going to be the only one from his crappy middle school to do anything worthwhile. Now his name was going to be tainted beside Deku's in their stupid Hall of Fame forever. Great. Just great. Where was he anyway? Deku scampered off like a freaking rat as soon as the bell rang, before Bakugo had the chance to teach him a lesson. Despite that, he had been sure that he'd reach Deku before he had the chance to get home and block Bakugo out of his life until UA started. Maybe he'd taking a detour to avoid him on purpose. Yeah, that sounded like something Deku would do. The coward. It didn't matter. It wasn't like he cared anyway. As soon as he joined UA, Bakugo would get the answers out of him. If the nerd lasted long at the school that was, which seemed unlikely. He didn't have a quirk. How could a quirkless loser like him get into UA? Yeah, something was up. And all the theories buzzing around his brain were driving him up the wall. He went to bed restless that night, staring at the ceiling in the darkness. It was in the morning that he received the news. Deku had been involved in another villain attack, and he'd been unconscious ever since he was pulled from the rubble. But alongside thoughts such as, the reckless danger-seeking idiot had it coming and what the actual hell was he thinking? Something nestled in the back of Bakugo's mind. Was it his fault? His fault that Deku was there in the first place? It seemed irrational, unreasonable. But no matter what he did, he couldn't shake the guilt. And although he couldn't bring himself to visit Deku's motionless self as the months went by, that thought buried itself deeper and deeper into his skin. If only the idiot would wake up. Then it would all finally leave him alone. But he didn't. Time went on, and most started to lose hope. But Deku was stubborn. He would never leave Bakugo alone, no matter how hard he tried to shake him off, he was always there. His classmates even unknowingly muttered about him. It was like he could feel his presence in Class 1A, sitting there in the empty seat behind him. It made the hairs on the back of his head stand on end. Wake up. Just wake up. But still, Deku remained silent. Until the summer camp, when his voice filled Bakugo's ears once more. Impossible. There's no way. It had to be some kind of quirk, tricking him, trying to get into his head. But even Bakugo could admit that it was freaking working. Bakugo, answer us, Todoroki insisted in that irritatingly deadpan voice of his. Who is Deku? Someone who should not be here. Bakugo yelled back. And for the last time, shut the hell up and focus on the DMN task at hand. This is serious, said Tokoyami. He isn't a student, so one would assume that he is either a villain or a vigilante. I wouldn't say villain, Shoji replied. He seemed like he was trying to help us. That green appearance reminds me of the ghost that Kaminari and the others have been so interested in, Todoroki reminded them. Perhaps he's been around us for a while, but only now decided to show himself. Just shut up. Bakugo yelled, letting his fire power burst from his aching palms. You should be dead. He already practically is. He has been for months now. So, he really is a ghost? Asked Shoji. I don't freaking know. Revelry in the dark, muttered Tokoyami. Suddenly, Todoroki stopped in his tracks. Hey, is that Uraraka? They stopped shouting at each other immediately and turned towards the path they were intercepting. Round Face had somehow pinned what looked like a schoolgirl to the ground, who had stuck some kind of needle into the gravity girl's leg. Uraraka! Shoji exclaimed. His voice surprised her and the villain slipped away from her grasp, disappearing into the woods whilst mumbling about not wanting to die that day. Todoroki and Shoji ran ahead to help Uraraka to her feet and assess the frog girl, who Bakugo hadn't acknowledged previously. He gritted his teeth. The girls were bleeding. That freaking villain. Bakugo didn't care what she looked like. She was so dead. Birdhead must have realized what he was thinking, because he reached forward to hold him back. Wait, we don't know. Bakugo tried to bat his hand away, but it never reached his arm. Frowning at how quickly his classmate's sentence had been cut short, he turned to face him, but he was gone. Hey, where? And in the blink of an eye, so was Bakugo. Bakugo remembers nothing until he was released from his marble prison. He had hated being so powerless, reliant on the others to save his skin. But they had failed. As Tokoyami fell to Shoji's side, Todoroki fell by Bakugo's feet, eyes wide with fear. Stay back, he warned, feeling the scared villain's hot hand grip tighter around his neck as he was pulled back into the swirling portal. And then the darkness welcomed him once more. Kaminari held Jiro's phone in his hand. One of the other girls knew the password and had typed it in for him. As sirens blared around them, Kaminari had his earplugs in, listening to the videos that she had taken as the ordeal unfolded. They didn't last long. Jiro passed out from the gas quite early into the attack. However, her phone continued to film for a while after, whilst she remained unconscious on the forest floor. The camera was angled so it could see her face, hand vaguely obstructing it as she breathed in the toxic fumes unwillingly. Hagakure could be seen in the background, also motionless on the floor. Kaminari just sat there, listening to the screams echoing through the forest through the video. How are you holding up, man? It was Kirishima, who had spent the entire time by Kaminari's side in the remedial class. Kaminari had half the mind of not replying and continuing to watch the flames creep closer towards his unconscious friends, but the video cut out from lack of memory soon after. I could ask you the same question, said Kaminari, pulling out his earplugs. He sighed, angling his head away from him slightly, watching planes put out the flames that stubbornly endured. I just feel so useless. You know? Whilst our friends were out there fighting for their lives, we just sat in the classroom and waited. Kaminari didn't know how to reply, mainly because he completely agreed. Despite being incredibly grateful that not only was his life spared, but he was able to avoid the fight altogether, he still felt strangely guilty for not being there for his classmates. He'd made close friends with Bakugo over the past few months. Well, as close as you could really get to Bakugo without being Kirishima. Now, with his presence completely erased from their company, Kaminari felt an emptiness inside. A budding sorrow and pessimism. Would he ever see his face again? And if he did, would things ever be the same? After a moment's thought, Kaminari scrolled back to the earlier video Jiro had taken after he had delivered instructions to be his backup vlogger, as she called it. He handed his left earplug to Kirishima, who took it without hesitation, rubbing tears from his eyes as Kaminari clicked play. They watched those videos and many taken days before, for the next who knows how long. He was surprised how easily they made him laugh, despite all that had happened. It didn't take long for his other classmates to gather around, and for Kirishima to remove the earplugs altogether to allow them to listen in. Thought Kaminari, I guess these videos are good for something after all. Eventually, those who needed it were transported to the nearest hospital, and the remainder of Class A and B were sent home to Distort parents, who welcomed them with open arms and plenty of tears after they heard the news. Over the next few days, Kaminari was stuck in his house. It didn't take long for the events of UA's summer camp to reach the news. It was all the media would talk about. But all Kaminari wanted was some space from it all. He didn't want to talk to detectives. He knew he had nothing worthwhile to say, except hand over Jiro's phone as evidence. All he wanted was to see his friends again. To see Jiro and Hagakure awake and happy, to see Bakugo. Preferably alive. So, when the class received news that Yaoyorozu had finally woken up, he jumped at the chance to visit, alongside the rest of the class excluding Mineta, who was apparently talking with Mr. Aizawa about his adverse behavior at the summer camp towards the girls. Hey Yamamo, said Mina. She wasn't acting at all like her usual, bubbly self. How's the head? Yaoyorozu touched the bandage wrapped around her skull briefly. Much better, thank you, she answered. We thought that we'd visit now that you're awake, explained Todoroki. Kirishima and I saw you earlier, but you were talking with All Might and the detective, so we decided it was best not to intervene. She nodded in understanding. Is all of class here? No, Ida replied hesitantly. Jiro and Hagakure are still unconscious, ever since being knocked out by that gas. All 16 of us came, added Uraraka. Of course, Bakugo's not here, interjected Shinso. The class fell silent. Kaminari couldn't even meet Yaoyorozu's eyes. Of course, she had only recently woken up, and he wasn't sure how much she had heard about this. He knew firsthand how hard it was to process. I've been looking through all those videos we've been taking over the semester, Kaminari began, bringing the conversation away from such a somber subject. I thought I could, montage some of the best clips together. It might be a nice distraction from it all for us. Thank you, Kaminari, Yaoyorozu replied. That sounds lovely. I'll put it in the group chat as soon as it's done, he continued. I thought I could do a separate one on all our Student 18 and Ghost theories though. Silence fell over them again. Kaminari was worried that his change of subject hadn't really worked. Everyone just seemed as upset as before, thinking back to all of their once happy memories of missing or unconscious friends. That's right, the ghost, murmured Shoji. Huh, frowned Uraraka. Todoroki, Tokoyami, his many-armed classmate continued. Do you remember in the forest, just before we encountered Uraraka and Tsuyu, we saw the green figure, Todoroki finished, his eyes widening. What are you talking about? Questioned Shiro. Yes, of course, how could I have forgotten? Said Tokoyami. Before being briefly detained by the masked magician, our group, which included Bakugo and an unconscious Tsuburaba, saw a strange being who floated in the air and was tinted luminescent green. What the hell? Shinso frowned. Just like the ghost, Uraraka realized. Ida suddenly gasped. We had a similar experience before joining you all in the classroom. Oh, right, that weird guy who saved Koda, right? Ojiro remembered. What on earth did we miss out on? Questioned Sato. Wait, Kaminari interjected. Are you saying there was actually a ghost? That doesn't make any sense, Yaoyorozu gaped. Did he talk to you too? Asked Todoroki. He talked. Kaminari explained, taking out his phone and beginning to film the conversation. He warned us that the villains were after Bakugo, he explained. Although he called him by a strange name. What was it? I cannot remember, replied Tokoyami. I think it was Deku, said Shoji. No, that was what Bakugo called the ghost, Todoroki recalled. Wait, Bakugo knew the ghost? Kaminari interrogated. Kaminari, this is not the time to be filming. Ida insisted. Kaminari elected to ignore him. When Mr. Aizawa attacked the e-ghost, when he took Koda back from the forest, his capture weapon went right through him and he disappeared, Ojiro told them. That was the only time we saw him, but Koda insisted that he had saved him from Muscular. That villain that the police found on the mountainside? Asked Sato. Could a ghost seriously render a guy like that unconscious? Are we sure this was really a ghost? Pondered Azui, tapping her chin with her finger. Perhaps it was just some person with a strange quirk. That seems like the most plausible explanation, Todoroki agreed. But that would mean that he has been with us since. The USJ, Yaoyorozu remembered. That green figure who protected All Might from the villain with the disintegration quirk. What if it was the same person? You don't think it actually is Student 18, do you? Wondered Mina. No, said Uraraka and Ida simultaneously. Which was just a little suspicious. If that was so, then Mr. Aizawa would have alerted us, Ida finished. Uraraka nodded in confirmation. Could we, talk to the ghost again? Deku, if that was his name? Mina suggested eagerly. A seance. Shinso grinned. I thought we said he wasn't actually a ghost? Kaminari retorted. I was kidding. Gasp. Shinso can joke. Mina exclaimed. Kaminari gazed around at his friends as smiles crept across their faces. Whether this was an actual lead or not didn't matter. It was taking his friends' minds off the horrible situation at hand, and that was all he cared about. But little did they know, as they plotted ways to contact their mysterious apparition, only a few rooms over, his body lay as still and as silent as it had always been. Kid, that was reckless and beyond stupid. Midoriya groaned, blinking and rubbing his eyes as his ghost rose from his body once more. Nana yanked him off his bed and glared at him with a deadly stare. What did I do? He hummed. What did you do? She repeated with a hint of sarcasm. What did you do? You almost killed yourself, you lunatic. I what? He said, eyes widening. You could have died, she yelled with seemingly enough volume to wake the dead. I mean living, comatose, people? And don't even start with that, I've been training, excuse. You were not ready to use that amount of power. Wait, what happened? Midoriya questioned. The purple ghost sighed exasperatedly, rubbing her temples to relieve the apparent stress. You ran in without thinking, sure, you saved the little squirt, which was awesome by the way. Midoriya grinned. No. I'm supposed to be scolding you here, stop smiling. He only smiled wider. Nana sighed once more, reached out, and pulled Midoriya into a hug. Just don't hurt yourself like that again, okay? He nodded. For your sake and ours, do you understand? Of course I'm sorry. They floated by his hospital bed in silence for a minute longer, both in deep thought of the events that had passed as they remained in the comfort of each other's arms. Want to do something else reckless and stupid? Asked Nana. You read my mind. Nana grinned. But seriously, don't push yourself like that again. You don't want to give yourself fits so bad that they pull life support. Oh, right. Yeah, that would be bad. Plus, you've got to get out of this coma, Sleeping Beauty. You've not got long left before the next semester begins. I know. I'm trying, but I don't know what to do. Oh, I don't know, how about actually talking to your teachers? Oh. Yeah, oh. Wait, that's not that reckless. What were you talking about earlier then? You couldn't hear when they were talking about that to you, were you? About what? Midoriya pushed away from the hug abruptly. What happened, Nana? She hesitated. Your friend, the explosion boy. Kei Kaken? He gasped. Thivuns, please don't tell me. He's alive, she said quickly. But, well, he was kidnapped, Midoriya. Midoriya stared at her. He sunk to the floor, head in his hands. No. I shouldn't have left. I should have helped. No, kid, listen to me, Nana ordered, crouching down beside him. You did everything you could, and a little more besides that. Anyway, it's not over yet. He looked up at her, pausing as he rubbed non-existent tears from his ghost's eyes. But what could I possibly do now to help him? The fallen hero smirked. Float through the wall. Just a few rooms over. I leave you to decide what to do. If you need me, just call my name. And with that, she was gone. Midoriya didn't hesitate that time. As soon as the purple had faded completely, Midoriya rushed across his hospital room and leapt through the wall, leaving his body behind. He didn't even see the tears rolling down his cheeks. Are you asking me to make another signal device for you? Yaoyorozu questioned. Kirishima and Todoroki hesitated, but then nodded in confirmation. No. It's just as All Might said. We ought to leave this matter to the pros. It's not our place to interfere, you fools. Ida yelled at his classmates. The others flinched at his sudden outcry. You think I don't know that? Kirishima retorted. But still, I couldn't do anything. Ida gritted his teeth, staring at him with narrowed eyes. My buddy is gone. And all I did was sit in that classroom and hoped for the best. If I don't act now, forget being a hero, I'm not even a man. Calm down, Kirishima, Kaminari warned, finger over his lips, urging him to be quiet. His phone was tucked deep into his pocket in this occasion. We get that you're a hothead, but in this case, Ida is correct, Azui finished. I know he's right. You all are, but maybe I can help. Everyone fell silent. It wasn't as tense as it had been, simply surprised and very confused. Who was that? Questioned Kirishima, his fists still clenched from the heated debate. Oh, wow, hey, this is actually working for once. Kirishima looked around the room frantically. It wasn't anyone he recognized. He was sure he'd never heard the voice in his life. But there was clearly no one else other than his classmates in the room. Even Todoroki looked spooked more than many of the others. Come to think of it. Who's there? Yaoyorozu asked hesitantly. This isn't how I thought it would go. Kirishima turned on his hardening and raised his right arm, ready to fight the intruder. However, something told him that whoever this was wasn't a threat. Koda actually screamed when, right beside him, a figure of green light formed seemingly out of nowhere. Then, the figure himself yelled in surprise and vanished as quickly as he had appeared. No, wait! Kirishima called out, lowering his guard immediately and cautiously approaching the now empty space beside Koda, who was quaking in fear. Come back! Was that? Shoji muttered. Todoroki turned and nodded covertly. Deku, that's your name, right? A moment of silence hung in the air, until, eventually, another flash of light filled Kirishima's vision, revealing the strange being once more. He stammered. Yeah, I guess. That's what Keikaken used to call me when we were younger. Why, you're the ghost. Uraraka exclaimed in realization. Oh, yes. Sorry. Oh, my God, Mina muttered, hands covering her mouth in shock. When Kaminari started to pull his phone out of his pocket, the green ghost suddenly lurched forward, zoomed straight through Kirishima and pushed the blonde's hand back down to stop him from filming. Kirishima shivered like he'd just been frozen by Todoroki, whilst Kaminari quivered with a mixture of fear and the same feeling of icy cold that the ghost seemed to radiate. He lacked the warmth of a real person, like he was nothing but solid air, well, solid when he wanted to be. Kirishima turned slowly to face the green figure once more. It was hard to pick out the details of him. He couldn't describe his clothing, but it was obvious he was wearing something, from the way the edges of his silhouette were made out. His hair looked messy, unkempt, and was probably the same length as his own. He could see clear indications of his eyes, and the basic shape of a nose and mouth, but the actual features of his face was blurred and almost flickered in the light. He floated a good few feet off the ground. Kirishima wondered if he could actually touch the ground, but he had managed to touch Kaminari. So, then there was his voice. Even if he had met this person before, his voice sounded so distorted and almost electric that he probably wouldn't have been able to recognize him. I'm sorry. I really am F for everything, the ghost, Deku, began. Who are you? Questioned Tokoyami immediately, not waiting for an explanation of what he might have been sorry for. Wow, This is really strange, he said, rubbing his head. I've known all of you for so long, but you still have no idea who I am. Kirishima's mouth fell open. You were at the USJ? The draft? The figure class 1B's been talking about. You've been here all along. Deku blinked at him. Yes, he said suddenly, clearly excited that Kirishima had caught on so quickly. That was me. It was all me, but I didn't have enough control over my quirk, I couldn't. You tried to warn Bakugo about the villains, Todoroki recalled. The ghost floated back over to Todoroki keenly. Yes, Are you one of them? He asked bluntly. What? No, I swear. I fought one of the villains. They thought I was a student and asked me where Kaken could be. Kaken? Kirishima frowned, still a little taken aback by the whole scenario. Whose? I mean Bakugo, he said quickly. Sorry. You apologize a lot, don't you? Yaoyorozu acknowledged. Sorry, he repeated without thinking. You're all a lot calmer than I thought you would be. This is your quirk, correct? Asked Ida, who had calmed down drastically from his argument with Kirishima. Well, it seems to be a weird application of it, he laughed nervously. Wait, so you're not actually a ghost? Asked Kaminari. Obviously not, you dunce, is what Bakugo would have said, supposed Kirishima. He almost smiled at the thought. He's not dead, said Azui, holding her finger to her chin. I'm almost dead, Deku replied. I don't know how much longer I have left. The ghost flickered as the rest of the class stood there, brewing a whole host of emotions, from lingering shock and fear, to sorrowful pity for the stranger. My quirk has a time limit, he continued. The more power I use, the less time I have in this form. I ran out of time at the summer camp, that's why I couldn't help you any more than I already did. I'm so sorry. You single-handedly took down a dangerous villain, skirted Koda back to camp and warned our classmate of their potential kidnapping, and you're apologizing to us? Kirishima cried in disbelief. The ghost flinched. I should have done more. Whilst I was stuck in the classroom, you actually did something. If that's not heroic, I don't know what is, man. Deku looked like he was ready to hug Kirishima with enough force to break his bones, but thankfully restrained himself, because Kirishima really didn't like the feeling of him passing through his body. You said you could help us, Todoroki reminded him. Oh right, Deku exclaimed. If you're going to try to get Kaken back, then I'll be there to help you. I can't get hurt like you can. There's no danger to me coming. Kirishima somehow knew that was a lie, but he was so desperate to get to Bakugo that he was willing to let it slide. If letting a half-dead ghost guy tag along on the rescue mission meant it could go ahead, then Kirishima wouldn't hesitate to agree. No one is going anywhere, Ida said menacingly. Think about it, the ghost continued. I will be here tonight, outside the hospital. I know this is hurting you. All of you. He glanced around a room. A sudden calmness was about him, something very different to his previous, nervous, stuttering self. I will be going to find Kaken with or without you. He turned back to Yaoyorozu, but I won't be able to go far without your help. So please. The door to Yaoyorozu's hospital room swung open. Sorry to interrupt, said the doctor. Kirishima turned to Deku, eyes wide in fright, but he was nowhere to be seen. It's time for Yaoyorozu's examination. They stood in a shocked silence, exchanging glances around a bewildered doctor. Let's get going, Shiro stammered eventually, glancing between the newcomer and the empty space where Deku had been only moments before. I'm worried about Jiro and Hagakure too. Slowly, the class began to file out of the room, but Kirishima lagged back with Yaoyorozu. If we're going, it has to be tonight, he warned her. I'll be there too, outside the hospital. Just think about it. She nodded timidly as Kirishima followed the others out of the room. He didn't notice Ida eavesdropping on his final conversation. Because ghost or no ghost, Ida wasn't about to let another one of his friends end up in a hospital bed. Todoroki stood alone in the surprising warmth of the night air outside the hospital that evening, deep in thought. He had a lot to think about. From the disappearance of Bakugo to the reappearance of Deku. The two seemed to know each other. Deku had addressed Bakugo as an old friend, one whom he had known since a young age. Bakugo, on the other hand, did not seem so pleased with their encounter. He did not recognize the ghost until the name Kaken was uttered. Yes, the voice of the apparition was very distinct, so one would presume that Bakugo would recognize it immediately, being familiar with the quirk of someone he had known longer than Todoroki initially supposed. However, the recognition was only held within that childlike name, to which Bakugo responded by calling the figure by a name which Todoroki would guess was also a nickname. Deku didn't seem like any recognizable surname, nor given name, and was likely a derivative of such. What confused him was that Bakugo didn't remember Deku's quirk. Surely, as soon as he saw the crackle of green lightning, he would have remembered him. It was a very distinct power. Yet, it was obvious that Bakugo had never seen anything like this before. Who is he? Someone who should not be here. That was what Bakugo had eventually told him after their encounter in the woods. Was that something to do with Deku being almost dead? What did that imply anyway? Was he sick? Terminally ill? Maybe in a coma? Todoroki pushed these thoughts aside when Kirishima appeared, hands in the pockets of his shorts and with an expression on his face that could only be described as sheer determination. I left Yaoyorozu to think about it, he explained after a moment's silence between them. Well, Todoroki replied. No matter how fired up we are, we're not going anywhere without her help. Ah, the redhead exclaimed suddenly. She's here. She came to a halt in front of them. She was dressed up like she was going out, leaving the hospital at the very least, but no so much like she was about to embark on a rescue mission. What do you say, Yaoyorozu? Kirishima questioned quickly. She gulped. Wait. The three turned to see Ida marching up the street towards them, hands clenched in obvious anger. This is foolish, he rumbled. You should know better. We're still under protection. And UA's already facing hard times as it is. Who do you think will take responsibility for your actions? Ida, listen. The group flinched as a flash of light appeared beside Ida, seemingly out of nowhere. It quickly formed into the silhouette of a person. The figure appeared clearer than it had been the past few times, thought Todoroki. At the summer camp, he flickered and glitched like he was struggling to maintain his form. Earlier that day, he was still blurry and difficult to make out. But now, although his facial features were still anything but distinct, his entire body seemed clearer and far more solid. Who the hell are you? Ida lashed out, turning on his heel to look the ghost in the eye. You turn up out of nowhere to convince my classmates to do something so reckless? Don't you care that even though you can't be hurt, that maybe they can? It's not like that, he stammered, raising his arms in surrender. I just want to help, not cause more trouble. Well, you're doing a fine job of that. Guys, let's not do this, please. Kirishima interjected. We don't know you, Ida continued, ignoring Kirishima's attempted intervention. I should report you to the police, not that we haven't mentioned your appearance at the summer camp before. You are a vigilante. No, I'm not, I swear. You are using your quirk against the authorities to perform heroic acts. If that isn't vigilantism, I don't know what is. Ida, I am dying. Deku yelled, his body flickering in his emotion. I didn't even know that I could do this, he gestured to his apparition, until it happened. I'm using my quirk against the authorities, yes, but if I don't, then I am nothing. Todoroki stared at him, trying to make sense of his words. They seemed encrypted, like he was trying not to enclose certain vital pieces of information to them. I see nothing. I can't move, can't breathe on my own. I try to fight against it, but it's useless, I just can't break free. Ida's stern exterior started to melt away. His brow furrowed into lines of worry and sympathy, mirroring that of Kirishima. Yaoyorozu stood still with her hand over her mouth, whilst Todoroki simply stared at the luminescent green figure as he told them his story. I want to be a hero, I have my entire life. So, I joined your class only a day after you started UA. I've been there the entire time, sitting in that empty desk. That seat was not meant for you. Ida interrupted, anger quickly returning to his expression. Ida, come on man, said Kirishima, stepping forward to Deku's side. Give him a chance to explain. The ghost sighed. No, Ida is right not to trust me. I don't have many more excuses for my actions. I guess I'll have to tell you another time. But not now. When I can, I will talk to you all, face to face, and give a proper explanation for it all. I swear. But right now, we need to focus on Kaken. Don't you understand? Ida thundered. What happens when your vigilantism exploits takes you and my friends somewhere there's no coming back from? My brother is paralyzed from a villain attack. I have a friend in a coma for jumping in to save a little girl and getting hurt in the process. Ida. I don't know who you are, he repeated. I don't know how you ended up like this. But don't you have someone who misses you? You told us that you're not dead yet. Isn't there anyone out there who cares about you? Who would want to stop you from doing this? The ghost stared at him. His flickering had gotten far worse during Ida's emotional outcry. It seemed to be getting to him. He hung his head in shame. I suppose I do. But whilst you know what it's like to watch friends become hospital R-ridden, I know what it's like to be that F-friend, Deku explained, his voice hitching like he was trying not to cry. Could ghosts cry? And I can't stand by and let someone else end up like me, not when I can help them. So, you would break the law to let your mind be at ease? Ida said, glaring at him furiously. Don't you care? Ida. Todoroki interjected, sensing his classmates' growing fury. You don't seriously think we're planning to smash down the door, guns blazing, do you? Ida frowned, turning to his friends in apparent confusion. We'll get Bakugo back without fighting, Kirishima explained, a small smile creeping across his lips. It's gonna be a covert mission. That's how we heroes in training can fight on the right side of the law. I trust you, Todoroki, Yaoyorozu added. But worst comes to worst, I should be there as backup, which is why I'm coming too. Yaoyorozu, the others cried with varying excitement. I'm not here to encourage you or to hold you back, Deku continued. I knew you'd be going after him, so I'll be by your side when you do. That way I can make a difference. I couldn't live with myself if something terrible happened and I didn't even raise a finger to stop it. I need to save him. Silence rang out amongst the unlikely group once more, eventually broken by Ida's exasperated sigh. There's no swaying you, he realized. In that case, take me with you. Are you sure, Ida? I wouldn't be saying this unless I was absolutely certain, he confirmed. If I think for even a second that it's going to devolve into a fight, I'll pull us out of there in a hurry. I am your class president. I am responsible for you. I won't stand by and let you do this, and if I can't stop you, then I won't let you do it alone. Kirishima's smile grew wider. Thanks, I guess. But you, he snarled, turning back to Deku. You are not my responsibility. Do as you wish. But don't blame us if anything goes wrong. And if it does, just know that I won't hesitate to blame you. Ida, he's technically our classmate too, Todoroki acknowledged. Ida gave him a look that clearly stated that he did not believe that. I don't trust you, he admitted, glaring at the ghost once more. I understand, Deku replied. But I hope that you will one day. Then prove to me that you deserve it. The ghost nodded without a moment's hesitation. Right then, Yaoyorozu interjected. She dug her hand into her pocket and pulled forth a small, handheld device that looked similar to an old-fashioned mobile phone, the signal receiver. The coordinates on the tracker point specifically to Kamino Ward, she explained. It should be about a 2-hour trip, so we'll arrive at about 10 p.m. But remember, I am siding with Ida in this situation. This is a job for the pros, not for students like us, or vigilantes, whoever we may be. Watching from the sidelines without interfering is what we should be doing. But I understand how you feel, so this is a good compromise, don't forget that. The group nodded in confirmation. Follow me, like Yaoyorozu said, we'll take the bullet train. I don't mind paying, Todoroki offered as they set off. The ghost groaned audibly, I hate moving vehicles. They ended up buying a ticket on the train for Deku. People gave the semi-transparent ghost some strange looks, but in a world of quirks, it wasn't the strangest things many of them had ever seen. Trying to fly alongside the bullet train would have been torturous for him. So, instead, he sat down next to Kirishima and opposite Todoroki whilst they munched happily on the food the latter had ordered for them. So, can you not eat? Kirishima questioned after about an hour of silence between them. Food? No, not in this form, Deku replied. He had been staring out of the window at the passing cities and fields, clearly lost in his own mind for a while. You're not always a ghost then? Asked Todoroki. No, he answered. I can't do anything when I'm not though. Because of how sick you are? Yeah. So, wait, let me get this straight, Kirishima interjected, swallowing his mouthful and putting down his chopsticks. You're terminally sick and can't move your body. So, you use your quirk to eject your spirit and decided to go to UA without anyone knowing about it. Well, the whole ejecting my spirit thing was a bit of an accident really. But then, you thought you'd just roll with it? I guess. I don't understand, how does your quirk work? Todoroki interrogated. Deku sighed. I'm struggling to understand that one too, he admitted. I didn't develop it until very late on in my life. I think it's because my body just wasn't ready to handle it until I started training to take the UA entrance exam. It's an enhancer quirk, basically. I've had a long time to think about it, and I think it's best explained like this. I have an energy that constantly flows through me. I can direct this energy towards my muscles to make me stronger or faster, or I can release it to direct a blast of it, kind of. Then when I got sick, this energy strengthened my spirit instead. I think. Oh, okay, Kirishima nodded. That weirdly makes sense. It does, replied Todoroki. The ghost sighed. I'm sorry. As I said, I don't really understand it either. What else can you do? They spent the remainder of journey quizzing Deku about his powers, why he couldn't talk to them before, what percentage of his quirk he could use, problems with his backlash, etc. With Yaoyorozu next to Todoroki, and Ida vaguely listening in from across the aisle of the train, the entire group was in good spirits when the train finally came to a stop. Listening to Deku retelling stories about pranking Kaminari with his videos, and sometimes doing it accidentally, even made Ida smile no matter how hard he tried not to. Were the disguises really necessary? Deku asked. He had made himself visible again after the group started to weave their way through the abandoned back alleys of Kamino Ward. Kirishima jumped in surprise. Jesus! I forgot you were there. Sorry, the ghost muttered. Is there any way you could turn off that glow? Ida hissed at Deku. You're like a homing beacon. Sorry, he stammered, and quickly became invisible once more. Don't be so harsh on him, Ida, said Kirishima. He had become quite fond of his new ghost friend during their 2-hour train ride to Kamino. I still don't understand why you never showed yourself to us before all this, Todoroki murmured. Honestly, I didn't know how to. That is not important at the moment, Ida interjected harshly. The ghost fell silent again. It was unnerving. Kirishima knew he was there, but he couldn't see or hear him. It was like a more frightening version of Hagakure. Okay, the tracker points to this location, Yaoyorozu interrupted. So, this is their hideout? I'd buy that, said Kirishima. We can't be sure, but I've been checking and the villains haven't moved from here all day, added Yaoyorozu. Just because the villains are here doesn't necessarily mean Bakugo is too. I need you all to realize that we're standing here now based on very limited information. And none of us are suited to stealth missions like Jiro and Hagakure. However, that is where I believe you can come in, Deku. You can count on me, his voice whispered in the wind. Kirishima and Todoroki glanced around the corner, gazing at the entrance to the building. No lights on, Kirishima acknowledged. Doesn't feel like anyone's home. Hide a tree in a forest, right? They've made it look like an abandoned warehouse. Look at the door, Deku muttered. There are weeds sprouting there, meaning it hasn't been used for a while or at least not frequently. Perhaps I should phase through and take a look inside. After that, the group was quickly displaced by a couple of men paying a little too much attention to Yaoyorozu. Eventually, Deku was able to lead them around the back of the building, where no one could spot them and they could negotiate in peace. Now what? Todoroki questioned. Hey, Deku, you said you could phase through, whispered Kirishima, who was unsure of where to look whilst addressing the invisible being. "Oh, right," he replied. A shift of the wind let them know that the ghost had completed the deed. However, only a few seconds later, and a flash of green light alerted them to Deku's reappearance. His figure crumpled to the floor beside Todoroki in shock. "What is it?" Kirishima hissed in panic. "Nomu!" "What?" Ida hissed. "There are loads of them, just sitting there in tanks. And I think I saw—" He wasn't able to utter a word more because, all of a sudden, a giant figure loomed above the warehouse and crushed the building with nothing more than her foot. Todoroki's wig was blown away as they ducked behind the wall at the back of the building, which somehow remained untouched. What happened, exactly?" questioned Ida, rubbing his head and clambering back to his feet. "I'll go look," Deku offered, and the green ghost disappeared without a moment's hesitation. "The heroes are here," he exclaimed excitably, his voice filling their ears to let them know that he had returned. "Empty Lady, Gang Orca, Best Jeanist, even Tiger from the Wild Wild Pussycats, A-Cheese with Ragdoll. I was right, I did see her back there. See? The pro-heroes were able to take the necessary action faster than we could." Ida realized with a sigh of relief, "We should leave now. There's nothing left for us to do." "They mentioned All Might's team, that must be where Kaken is," Deku added. "If All Might's here, then we really have nothing to worry about." Yaoyorozu interjected, "So let's hurry and—" Her line of thought was interrupted by the words of an unknown figure, who calmly wandered from the shadows of the destroyed warehouse. In less than a second, every pro-hero and officer on the scene were knocked to the ground. Whatever power that man had used had rendered every single one of them incapacitated in an instant. But that was more than enough time to fill even a ghost with an utter fear of death. I have an idea." The 5 of them had been standing there, behind the dilapidated wall as the battle progressed behind them, as Kaken appeared, and whilst All Might begun his fight against this All for One. "No, we can't, Deku," Ida begun, eyes still fixed on the air in front of him, beads of sweat trickling down his forehead. "Yes, we can." "Did you not listen to a word I said?" he hissed. "We're not like you. We can't engage in battle. But there's a way to rescue Kaken and get away at the same time. Without fighting." "Go on," Todoroki insisted. And for once in Midoriya's life, they listened. "Take my hand," Kirishima cried as they soared across the battlefield. Midoriya hung tight onto Kirishima and Ida, lending his power to propel them through the air. He wondered if All Might saw any recognition in the neon green figure that flew over his head. With a burst of firepower, Kaken leapt from the ground and somehow grasped his friend's hand with such confidence that Midoriya wondered if he had practiced flying at such velocity before. "You idiots," he grinned, eyes drifting over Midoriya, missing him completely in the heat of the moment. As they escaped the war zone, aided by MT Lady's counterattack against the final attempt of the villains to keep Kaken within their grasp, the group quickly lost altitude. "Bakugo, on my mark," Ida began. "Don't tell me what to do," Bakugo retorted, but somehow followed Ida's intended instructions anyway, despite the fact that he never let them leave his mouth. Finally, they reached the ground, escaping with nothing more than a few cuts and bruises. "Yeah," exclaimed Kirishima, punching the air in exhilaration after the success of their daring plan. "You all right, man?" "Of course I am, you idiot," Bakugo replied. He seemed so happy to see them that he couldn't even think of a better insult. Ida had his hands on his knees, hot air being blown from his exhausts as he breathed from the tiring effort the plan required of him. "It worked. Deku, you're a genius," Kirishima continued. "Oh no." Bakugo's bright smile quickly faded. He turned but his eyes met nothing but emptiness. "You still there?" asked Kirishima. Midoriya sighed and allowed himself to become visible once more. He could feel the tug of his body now. The power he had used was already starting to take its toll. But he owed this to Kaken. "Yeah," he replied. Midoriya knew his figure was flickering. It did that when he was nervous. He could see the reflection of his light in Kaken's eyes, and in the shadows it cast on the floor of the road they had crash-landed in. After a prolonged moment of stunned silence, Whilst the cogs turned in Kaken's mind, his expression morphed from that of surprise to a frightening sneer. So, it is you, Deku, he decided to say. Kaken, Midoriya stammered. So, you two know each other somehow, right? Kirishima recalled. How long has it been since you last saw each other? When he was alive or dead? Kaken snarled. Could we not talk about this right now? No. You're going to tell me right now what the hell is going on, Deku. Kaken yelled. It's my quirk. You don't have a quirk. How else can I explain to this? Kaken hesitated, looking the ghostly apparition up and down for a moment. I've had the last few days to think about this, but I still can't make any freaking sense out of it. Please, I promise that I'll explain everything to you, all of you. But just for now, we need to make sure Todoroki and Yaoyorozu are okay. What the hell? Kaken exclaimed. How many of you imbeciles came here? That's all of us. Kirishima explained happily. And thanks to that, the rescue was a success. Hey, you didn't rescue me. You idiots just happened to be my best escape route. You're welcome. You two, go on ahead. Kaken and Kirishima looked to Ida. Huh? Kirishima replied. What about you? I have Yaoyorozu's contact details, so I'll call her to ensure that they got out safely. In the meantime, Bakugo, you should head to the police, Ida explained. Tisk, he muttered in response. Kaken didn't look like he wanted to hang around. Midoriya briefly considered if it was because he was worried the villains would come after them. But then he acknowledged the way his old friend glared at him. There were such conflicting emotions in his eyes. It seemed like he had been thinking long and hard about Midoriya's appearance in the summer camp. He wanted so desperately to go with them, but he hated the idea of leaving Ida alone in such a dangerous time. Come to think of it, why was Ida hanging back? It didn't make any sense. They heard a crash echo in the distance. News helicopters soared overhead, the resonating sound of their blades cutting through the air added to the panicked sounds of the city surrounding them. All Might was fighting All for One. Midoriya didn't know who this was, but it was clear the two had history. And Midoriya knew everything about All Might. Could this have been? No, was this the villain from 5 years ago? The one who left that gaping hole in his hero's stomach. I have to go back, Midoriya decided. Wait, where? Kirishima questioned. To the fight. I can't be hurt, and I have to help in any way that I can, he reasoned. You can't be hurt, huh? Kaken repeated. Midoriya frowned at him. So, that flash at the UA, the one that blew the hands guy away from All Might, that was you, wasn't it? Realized Kaken. He nodded hesitantly. That's the same day you had that seizure. The other two stared at the ghost. Midoriya felt his apparition flicker more and more. Don't be a freaking reckless idiot. Kaken cried. That's how you got in this mess to begin with. It's freaking All Might, he doesn't need your help. Get your head out of the clouds and back in your body, if you can even do that. Kaken, Come on, Kirishima. Huh. I said we're going. Kaken exclaimed, grasping his friend's wrist and practically dragging him down the street, towards the gathering crowds. Midoriya sighed, letting them wander away from him. He understood why Kaken would be angry, but he hadn't expected him to realize that he had such a backlash, or even care about it. It was almost like a compliment from him, or at least as close to one as he would hope to venture. Is that true? Midoriya would have jumped out of his skin if he had any at that point in time. He had completely forgotten Ida was still there. Dear. Well, I don't know about a seizure, but I do have some backlash to using so much of my quirk, he admitted. Why? Ida started, but the words seemed to get lost on the way from his brain to his mouth. It took a moment for him to rethink them. You lied to us. No, I swear Just because you don't feel long-lasting pain, doesn't mean you aren't hurt. Midoriya hesitated. That wasn't the excuse he was going to make, but it resonated with him, nonetheless. Why are you sacrificing so much for us? Ida questioned. He showed little emotion on his face. His shock seemed to devoid him of such. I'm not sacrificing anything. Midoriya insisted. I'm just trying to help. Ida didn't know what to say. Midoriya could hear the blows All Might was taking and receiving in the background. He so desperately wanted to go to at least witness the battle, but he couldn't leave Ida like this. "You," Ida murmured after another long minute's silence. "You really are a hero." He could practically feel his heart back at the hospital skip a beat. As a member of Class E, were given permission to fight by Mr. Aizawa. According to Todoroki, you left before that permission was renounced. Therefore, everything you have done was not against the rules. You aren't a vigilante, nor a villain, and I deeply apologize for addressing you as such, Ida said, bowing his head before him. Midoriya smiled softly. "Ida, I'm sorry for not trusting you." He hesitated. He could see the tears rolling down Ida's face. "Hey, you don't have to apologize." "Yes, I do," Ida insisted, looking Midoriya in the eye once more. "You acted like a true hero, both at the training camp, and now, the USJ too. Far more than I did. As soon as I knew what had happened to you and why you are like this, all I could think of were the acts of my brother and my friend, both incapacitated for self-sacrifice parallel to your own. I didn't want anyone else to be succumbed to that pain. I felt that I couldn't trust you, someone who just bypassed all of that with your quirk, and who didn't truly appreciate what heroism was all about. But I see now that I overlooked you and your true motivations. Deku, I am truly sorry," he finished, bowing deeply for a second time as he rubbed the tears from his face, taking the fake mustache along with them. Midoriya didn't know what to say. For a while longer, he floated before Ida as more tears poured down his face. Midoriya doubted that they were all for him, likely pent-up emotion and guilt dating back since not long after his brother's accident. "Ida," Midoriya begun, reaching out and placing his hand gingerly on his tall friend's shoulder. He shivered slightly, looking upright at the floating figure, having to squint slightly without his glasses. "I'm sorry too, for not telling you the truth." He pulled the slightly cracked lenses of his wired glasses from his pocket and put them on in an attempt to see the blurred figure a little clearer, not that it would have helped. What about?" he questioned eventually. "My name isn't Deku," he continued. "Deku is a play on the kanji of my given name. That was Kaken's doing. Sometimes I wonder if he can even remember my real name." Then what is your name?" "It's Izuku." Ida stared at him, unintentionally holding his breath. "Izuku. Midoriya?" "Yeah." Midoriya felt Ida's gaze on him for a while longer as he stubbornly fixed his eyes on his friend's shoes. What was he going to say? What was he going to do? Would he run? Would he shout at him? Ida stepped forward, grasping Midoriya's solid hand, and pulled the apparition into a tight embrace. Midoriya was so shocked that he became fully solid. Ida could feel nothing but cold air, but the warmth of his gesture was enough to fill the gap. "I'm so sorry," Ida repeated for the third time. "I'm sorry we had to meet like this. Ghosts can't cry." But the hospital staff could see the tears streaming down their comatose patient's face instead. They would have hugged for longer if Midoriya hadn't been so distracted by the sound of the blows being dealt in the background of the panicked city. "No," Ida croaked. "Don't go to them." He tried to keep a hold of Midoriya's arm, but his hand slipped right through him as he let his tangibility fade once more. "I have to help Ida," Midoriya insisted. "Don't try to fool me again," he retorted, his eyes tight shut, but tears were still streaming from them. "We heard what Bakugo said. Every time that you use your power, you give yourself seizures." "Not every time. I swear, it's only if I overdo it." "And are you seriously trying to say that forcing your physicality all the way here on the train, then helping us save Bakugo, isn't overdoing it?" Midoriya stammered. Ida was right. Even then, Midoriya could feel the tug of his body. He was sure that it wasn't a dramatic response back at the hospital yet, but going to All Might definitely wasn't going to help matters. Then when has that ever stopped him? "It doesn't matter what happens to me. I'm as good as dead, but I can still make sure that the people out there, in the rubble, don't end up being crushed by falling buildings." Ida stared at him in shock. He didn't realize how passionately Midoriya felt about this. He thought he was just a martyr, but it was far more than that. Midoriya knew firsthand what it was like to be on the receiving end of a villain's rampage. It wasn't even like he was supposed to be the victim. He jumped in and took that place for someone else. Midoriya had an undying, irrevocable instinct to rescue others. He moved without thinking, often at his own peril. But he didn't care. Because how could he carry on, knowing that he could have done something to change how things turned out, if he didn't put his best foot forward and try his very hardest? Remember to call Yaoyorozu and Todoroki, Midoriya murmured after a moment of silence. I can't stop you, can I? Ida realized. I'm sorry, Ida, but I have to do this. I don't know how much I can do to help, but I still can't stay idly by whilst someone's in trouble. Ida nodded hesitantly in respect. But as Midoriya turned to leave his friend behind, he asked him one last question. Were you there? When I spoke to you about my brother, when I brought Uraraka with me? Ida, Midoriya interrupted. He looked him in the eye, steam building up on his glasses. I've always been there. Show the world how pitiful you really look, O symbol of peace. All for One had paused his fight as he stared All Might down. The blows he was landing now were to his mentality now. Physically he was through. All Might knew in that moment that One for All wasn't going to last much longer in his frail body. The last of its great flame was about to blow out, snuffed from existence by the very man who originally forged it. Yet, unbeknown to the villain, that fire still glowed. It burned within a young man who lay in a hospital bed far away from where All Might stood. As Toshinori screamed in his anguish, the pain of the past flooding his mind, his thoughts were consumed by the three faces which haunted him: Nana Shimura, Tamura Shigaraki, Izuku Midoriya. Don't give up, called a feeble voice, that of the young lady trapped in the rubble behind him. All Might, please, save me. It was those words which reinstated the drive within him, which lifted his fist one last time to finish the fight that he started. As the heroes joined the fight, lifting the injured from the wreckage of the city, hope weeded its way back into his mind and pushed past the lingering thoughts of those three people. But not for long. Although, All for One continued. There is still one thing that puzzles me, All Might. He rose off the ground, stored quirks building up in his arm in a way that mirrored the hero's distorted form. You are clearly weaker, but that is not simply due to our last duel. One for All has left you, hasn't it? Izuku Midoriya. Strange. I watched the sports festival intently, as you might expect. You were there, in the stands of the first-year event, meaning that you did not take a successor from any other year. I am no fool. I know that you returned to that city to find someone worthy of your power within that school, yet not a single first year possesses anything like your quirk. I would know. I am the one who spawned it. So where are they, All Might? Izuku Midoriya. Have you failed them already? Or did they fail you? Nana! Midoriya yelled, standing on a rooftop overlooking the battle. All Might had raised his fist, but it was wavering. What was All for One telling him? The hero appeared in a flash of purple light. She didn't face Midoriya, and instead gazed upon her successor, hands on her hips and her cape blowing majestically behind her. I can't do anything to help him, kid. What? Midoriya stammered in surprise. I would if I could, she sighed. But I'm not like you. I truly am gone. I only exist within One for All, in you. I can't become tangible or speak to anyone like you can. What do I do? I have to help him. Somehow. Tell him. Midoriya turned. It was not Nana who spoke. A third figure appeared beside them, one glowing in an iridescent silver. His hair was long and covered most of his face. Like the other ghosts, his figure was blurred and face distorted, but Midoriya recognized him. This was one of the ghosts which used to trail him around before he first spoke to Nana. Tell him what? Midoriya questioned. What we told you, you are not alone. All Might swung his fist to counter that of All for One, but with his impact reversal quirk, the broken, blooded and bruised man was pushed back, further and further. He couldn't do this. This would be the end. I'm so sorry, young Midoriya. Don't give up yet, Toshinori. All Might's eyes widened. There, right beside the deformed face of All for One, was a purple figure, whose expression was somehow equally disfigured, and yet so familiar. Nana Shimura. Remember your origin, remember why you are here. All Might wasn't sure if he was hallucinating or if this was the last act of his peculiar quirk. Nonetheless, the statement brought back memories of that cold, winter's day when he first met his predecessor. The image of her smiling face brought tears to his eyes. Am a symbol, All Might groaned as he was overcome by the power of his enemy. He couldn't be defeated. As a symbol of peace and justice, he had to stand strong, just for this last time. His final job. But he just couldn't. Because all he could think of was, "Come on, All Might," cried another voice. Wait, he knew that voice too? No, that couldn't be. There, on the other side of All for One, was an apparition of neon green. He was far clearer than Nana, like the crystal waters of a lagoon. And he was smiling. All for One had no eyes to see the ghosts. All Might didn't know if he would be able to see them even if he did. But he had a strong feeling that this was due to his connection to One for All. Win this, his successor cried. I'm still here, All Might. I always have been. I'm going to get out of this coma, I swear to you. But you have to be there when I do. Tears blurred the hero's eyes. He didn't care if this was real or not anymore. His successor gave him a force of determination, a ray of hope that his future symbol of peace should supply. He did not fail me, All Might exclaimed, feeling One for All course through him again as he pushed back against the villain. And I will not fail him. I see, All for One murmured calmly as the fight continued. How unseemly! I cannot allow myself to die. All Might yelled as he swung his fist. He used it as a decoy and in the last moment, transferred his power to his other hand. But would it work? All Might didn't know if he had enough strength left in him. You are not alone, All Might, the figure of Midoriya cried. A flash of green lightning enveloped his arm, strengthening his muscles, lending him enough power to deal his final blow. United States of Smash. Rescue efforts undertaken by heroes during All Might's battle continue apace. But the number of casualties is estimated to be very high, the reporter announced to her camera in a desperate voice. The villain who caused all this devastation is, there he is. They're putting him in a maiden. Watched under a state of high alert, courtesy of All Might and Company. Her speech was cut short as the broken hero lifted his shaking hand and pointed at the camera. Wake up. You're next. To most, the simple words were seen as a message to all the yet unseen criminals out there, that the heroes would prevail, no matter what, and that it was time for them to wake up and see that fact, or else they would be next to be marched in cuffs towards a short life behind bars. But to someone else, someone who could not hear those words, it would have been interpreted very differently. Ida had caught up with Todoroki and Yaoyorozu, who pushed through the crowd in search for the other two. But as they did so, they couldn't help but gaze up at the news screens and watch the battle progress. Very few knew the true meaning behind that green power that added to All Might's last attack. But Ida did. As the rest of the city cried out in celebration of the villain's defeat, something about those words resonated with Ida. He couldn't have known they were truly meant for Midoriya, but, nonetheless, only one desperate wish remained in his mind. Wake up, please. Bakugo was eerily quiet once he was handed over to the police. The rescue team had managed to regroup after the panic started to die down. With the operation over, they ditched their disguises and went their separate ways. All the while, many questions circled Ida's head like vultures. Yes, they had succeeded in their mission to bring Bakugo back safely, but meanwhile, something which they should have attended to long ago had finally had light shed upon it. The mystery of Student 18 and Yue's ghost. They were one and the same. Midoriya Izuku, the enigma of which Ida had felt as though he became close friends with, despite the chance that the comatose boy couldn't even hear the heartfelt words that Ida had said. But now everything had changed. He had heard him. All the while, Midoriya had been right there, silently beside him wherever he went. And the same went for Uraraka, and all his other classmates, their silent protector. Their rescue mission took most of the night. Ida returned to his home and forced himself to get some rest, which was torturously difficult. Of course, his family had no idea what he had really gone out to do whilst All Might's final frontier was reached, but that didn't stop them worrying. With their knowledge of the coma boy that Tenya visited from time to time, they had assumed that he had remained at the hospital all day, being with him and the other girls who had been hurt after the attack on the summer camp. That meant that they would be increasingly suspicious if Ida set out immediately to the hospital once he had showered and rested. He decided to respectfully leave the visit for a day or so in light of this assumption. However, when he reached the hospital the following afternoon, he regretted not being there sooner. "I'm afraid Izuku Midoriya is not open for visitors this afternoon," said the nurse respectfully. He knew Ida's face well, due to his frequent visits. He wondered if not having Uraraka by his side raised any eyebrows. "Why not?" Ida stammered. The nurse opened his mouth to reply after a slight hesitation but was halted by the appearance of someone new. "Mrs. Midoriya!" Ida exclaimed once he turned to see her. His glad expression due to her arrival quickly faded once he saw her tear-stricken face. "Mrs. Midoriya, what happened?" "I am here to see my son," she managed in a surprisingly calm voice despite her appearance. "And Ida W. will come with me." The nurse sighed, but didn't seem to have the heart to say no. He wrote their names down on the visitor's book and nodded with understanding as Mrs. Midoriya led Ida down the hospital's familiar corridors towards Izuku's room. Ida was incredibly worried for his friend. But he didn't press Mrs. Midoriya for information, deciding to wait humbly until they reached his bedside. She opened the door and then closed it behind him. The two sat down on the chairs that Ida and Uraraka often took during their visits and gazed upon Midoriya's motionless self. Ida immediately knew something was horribly wrong. Midoriya's breath hitched with every inhalation. The electrocardiogram, which monitored his heartbeat, seemed to show its rate to be abnormal, not with the familiar intervals that Ida had become accustomed to between its rhythmic beats. There were heavy purple bags under the comatose boy's eyes, like he was heavily deprived of sleep despite his condition. Moreover, he seemed to be sweating like he had just come back from a run in the summer's heat, regardless of not moving from that bed in little under 5 months. His conditions gotten a lot worse, Saida. Inko barely managed, gulping between waves of tears. But why? Ida questioned, lines of worry etching themselves seemingly permanently onto his forehead as he glanced between Inko and Izuku. "The doctors don't understand," she stammered. Ida handed her a handkerchief from his pocket, which she accepted gratefully and dabbed her eyes with. "They thought he was getting better. But then they said he started crying all of a sudden." "When was this?" "During All Might's fight yesterday. I haven't told him about that yet. He was always such a huge fan." Ida's eyes widened and his heart plummeted. Had Midoriya started crying whilst they were talking? Was this his fault? Those bags under his eyes, the redness of his skin, it was like he'd been crying uncontrollably. Was that even possible for a coma patient? Then again, Midoriya was in no ordinary coma, as Ida had recently discovered. It seemed so strange, seeing him lying there after all that had happened, and everything that he'd said. Then it happened again. "What did?" Ida asked, the panic clearly interpretable from his tone of voice. "He had another seizure," she sobbed before blowing her nose audibly. If Ida was connected to that electrocardiogram, he wouldn't have been surprised if it recorded his heart stopping with an ear-piercing sound. The panic overriding his mind seemed to play that hypothetical noise over and over again, although it fell short of the ears of anyone else in the vicinity. He lashed out like he was having a bad dream, kicking and fidgeting. "They don't have any way to stop him, so all they can do is stand by and watch you until it's run its course," she explained, staring at Midoriya. She placed a hand on his forehead. The act covered up most of his face. The remainder was covered by his oxygen mask. It really emphasized to Ida how small and fragile he seemed, despite knowing that he'd single-handedly taken down Muscular at the training camp and helped All Might defeat All for One. It was incredible to think about how much power was stored up in such a sick little body. How much heart that body, or perhaps soul, contained. He was so willing to sacrifice himself for the good of others, no matter the cause or the cost. Alongside his brother, Ida saw Midoriya as one of his greatest inspirations for heroics. It pained him to think of what had happened to the two of them for following their dreams. What felt worse was what he remembered he had said to the ghost, so oblivious to who he really was and what he had done for them. He used his quirk unintentionally too, Mrs. Midoriya added, breaking Ida's train of thought. They thought at first that the seizures were him trying to get O out of his coma. But that C can't be right. Then he started crying in, well, I don't know what to think anymore. But surely tears show an emotional response to something. Ida acknowledged. Wouldn't that suggest that he's improving? Even if it's a reflex for pain, then at the very least, it's a reflex. That implies brain activity, and that he's still here. Inko sniffed loudly, and crumpled Ida's handkerchief up into a ball in her fist. Thank you, Ida. They sat in silence for a while longer. The sound of the ticking clock mingled with the noise of the electrocardiogram. It became almost painful to hear. Ida tried to diverge his attention elsewhere. He could hear the activity of the hospital beyond that room. The sound of people hurrying from place to place, oblivious to the situation behind the closed door, their panicked footfalls and the squeaking sound of wheeled stretchers hurrying past. Even in the intensive care unit, the hospital was a hive of activity. But still it could not compare to the whirring of Ida's mind. Nothing was working, nothing could distract him. It was so hard to believe that only one day ago Midoriya was right there, talking to him. He was a ghost, half dead, yet still desperate to lend a hand in any way that he could. In Midoriya's current condition, Ida doubted that he was even partially conscious. Ida remembered Midoriya explaining that his quirk had a time limit during their talk on the train to Kamino. That meant that he couldn't stay away from his body forever, and always had to return to it eventually. Ida wondered if he had been able to leave his body at all since the incidents. Again, it was obvious that was the truth. He didn't even believe that Midoriya was aware of his and his mother's presence. He was closer to death than he had ever been. Ida shouldn't have let him leave. He should have stopped him, somehow. There had to have been a way. The guilt started to eat away him. He knew it was futile, that there was nothing that he could have realistically done to stop an incorporeal being. He knew this feeling did nothing good for anyone. Yet for some reason he just couldn't shake it. He clenched his teeth and balled his fists, lowering his head as he tried to hold back the tears pricking at his eyes, the lump rising steadily in his throat. They've told me to consider turning off life support. What? No, you can't. I don't know what to do. Inko sobbed, taking big gulps of air between her renewed river of tears. I know you're his friend Ida. But he doesn't have anyone else. No one else has visited him, just you and that nice girl Uraraka. An old friend from our street came once too, but He's not like you too. You've been so kind and selfless and optimistic about everything. I can't thank you enough, but I don't know how much longer I can cope with this. I don't know how much longer he can cope. If he doesn't wake up in the next few weeks, then UUA has no choice but to expel him. The sounds of the hospital blurred into white noise. A static filled Ida's mind. All he could see now was Midoriya's broken body. Getting weaker and weaker. He should tell his mother about his ghost, but Ida wasn't sure why Midoriya hadn't told her already. He didn't want to take that away from him. It was his choice, not Ida's. But could Midoriya even leave his body anymore? Did he overdo it that much? A twitch. Mrs. Midoriya. Ida exclaimed suddenly. There it was again. Zuku, she cried, lunging forward to grasp the hand that had flinched. The movement repeated. A clenching and releasing of his muscles. The white noise faded, grounding Ida back into reality, a brilliant ray of hope penetrating Ida's darkest thoughts as his friend began to stir. Izuku, Inko repeated. Wait, no, something's wrong here. The contractions of his muscles became rapid, uncoordinated, panicked. Unnatural. Ida fumbled with the button to call the doctor. As he pressed it repeatedly, he became painfully aware of the increasingly frequent intervals between the sound that the electrocardiogram emitted. All Ida could do was watch and hold Mrs. Midoriya back as Izuku's movements became more erratic and frightening. The doctor arrived with startling efficiency. Ida didn't break his gaze from Midoriya as the medical team arrived. He didn't hear them stammer questions about why they were even allowed in. The static filled his mind once more as he was pushed gingerly from the room by a nurse with a pitiful expression. Her words drifted in from one ear and out the other. They were words of compassion, he was sure, but they meant nothing to him. All he managed to register as the door closed and his fitting friend was blocked from view was, "Everything's going to be okay." Was it? He dreamt of rhythmic beeping that night. Beeping, beeping. Until it stopped. And he woke up. It's not until you are the one connected to a heart monitor that you come to truly appreciate how calming that rhythmic beeping can be. For someone in as dire a situation as Midoriya, it was a constant, gentle reminder that, yes, he was still alive and his heart was still beating. If it weren't for that sound, Midoriya would have seriously doubted he had survived at all. Then again, if he were dead, he wouldn't have been able to feel all this pain. The semi-consciousness of his coma that he had grown so accustomed to flooded back to him a few days after the incident with All for One. It seeped down through his muscles. Every one of them ached and throbbed unnaturally. Every breath was sharp and painful. He was thankful for the oxygen flowing through his mask. He didn't know what he would do without it. Midoriya couldn't remember it ever being like this before. He tried to leave his body, but it was no use. The pain seemed to tie him down in shackles and chains to his bed and his useless body. In the months prior, the pain associated with overdoing it in his ghostly apparition usually was limited to a torturous headache and being trapped within his body for a while longer than he would have liked. He had felt disconnected with himself, like someone had flipped a SWs off in his brain, halting his movements and numbing his nerves, to the extent where even the gentle, kind touch of his mother's hand was hard to acknowledge at times. Never before had he been so aware of the blackness of his vision, or the stiffness of his legs. He lay there for a while. The silence around him, filled only with the sound of the whirring and beeping machines, told him that the hospital was not busy, which was unusual, unless of course, it was the middle of the night. Yes, that would make sense. The pain didn't edge away, but his head didn't hurt anymore. He took that as a sign that his body was okay for him to leave once more. He had half the mind of wandering the hospital and checking to see if Jiro and Hagakure were still there. He hoped they weren't. He tried to sit up, but a sharp, aching pain shot through him, pinning him down against the pristine sheets of his hospital bed. Midoriya groaned. Even the vibration of his throat brought pain. What was going on? His limbs felt so heavy, much unlike the lightness of his ghost that he was so used to now. Wait a second. Wait. Was he in his body? Or was he a ghost still? Slowly but surely, he opened his eyes. The world was dark. It was kind to his eyes, which had been out of use for so long. A calm, orange light seeped into the room from the window. It mingled with the neon green of the monitors around him in a stark contrast. It took longer than it should have for his vision to clear and for the world to stop spinning. Once it had, realization dawned on Midoriya faster than the sun rose outside his window. Oh my God, I'm awake, I'm awake, I'm awake. He could see the lights of the electrocardiogram flicker faster and faster. He could feel his heart beat quicker and his chest rise and fall. He could taste the dryness of his mouth as panic ensued. Smell the sterile nature of the hospital that unknowingly held him prisoner. He could hear that beeping become more and more erratic. Hey, calm down, deep breaths, a voice inside his head instructed. It sounded suspiciously like Nana, although Midoriya doubted it was really her. His breaths were raspy and painful, but he pushed through, almost shaking in a toxic mix of panic and excitement until the heart monitor alerted him that he had returned to his resting state once more, or at least as resting as he was going to get in that moment. He lay there for a while. His mind was blank as he just stared at the ceiling, savoring every voluntary blink and breath of air. Midoriya was almost too frightened to close his eyes. The fear of not being able to open them again consumed him for at least an hour. But after a while, his eyelids became heavy, and his aching body slipped under the ocean of unconsciousness once more. "Good morning, Midoriya," said a familiar voice. Midoriya was pulled from his slumber with a start. His breath hitched, but he made no movement with his painful muscles. He felt somewhat heavier than before, somehow more sore and stiff than he'd ever been. "Your mother is at work today," Dr. Adachi informed him. "I'm afraid that we're still not permitting anyone other than immediate family to visit you until your condition is more stable. I hope you understand." His presence was always so calming and reassuring. He was a hero in his own right, always so kind and keen to help Midoriya, despite the glaringly obvious possibility that he may never be able to thank him. However, that possibility suddenly seemed far less improbable, unbeknownst to the young doctor. Every morning, Midoriya's favorite doctor was there to check his vitals and test the comatose patient's reflexes. His quirk allowed him to contract any muscle of Midoriya's usually immovable body. He didn't need to help him, but he did anyway. With Dr. Adachi's help, Midoriya didn't lose quite as much muscle mass as he perhaps should have. "Strange, your heart rate was up quite high early this morning," the doctor acknowledged. Dr. Adachi didn't see Midoriya's hand twitch on the other side of his body. He flexed the muscles in his hand, relishing in his ability to curl his fingers and form a fist. He was so distracted by his newfound freedom that he didn't register Dr. Adachi warning him that he would be testing his reflexes, until he pulled open his right eye and shone a light in it. The doctor didn't have any need to record how much his patient's pupil changed in size when Midoriya snapped his eye shut in surprise, pulling a face at the sudden light as it left that purple spot dancing across his vision. "Midoriya?" the doctor called, resting his hand on Midoriya's shoulder and shaking him gingerly. "Midoriya, are you?" He groaned and slowly opened his eyes once more, squinting up at Dr. Adachi, who was haloed by the light of day. The doctor crouched down by his bedside, his mouth open as his clipboard fell to the floor alongside the little torch he had shown in Midoriya's eye seconds before, which rolled under his bed with a clatter. "Midoriya?" he repeated. "Can you hear me?" As Midoriya's eyes became adjusted to the light, he let them open wider, and for the first time, rested them upon his doctor's face. He opened his mouth and tried to reply, but nothing recognizable fell from his lips. It's okay, Dr. Adachi insisted, putting his hand on Midoriya's shoulder once more. "You don't have to say anything. Can you give me a nod? Is that too difficult for you?" Midoriya shook his head, but then panicked and nodded instead. The doctor laughed. Midoriya could see the excitement sparkling in his eyes. "Why, you're awake," he realized, smiling from ear to ear, showing the dimples in his cheeks and the pearly white smile worthy of a doctor. Midoriya nodded, before smiling himself, realizing that tears were rolling down his cheeks. After a moment, Dr. Adachi leapt to his feet and pressed the call nurse button near Midoriya's head. Midoriya remembered the expression on each and every one of their faces as people filed in and out of his room. Their beaming smiles and relieved tears were more appealing to Midoriya than the new flowers on his bedside table. He was asked question after question, all yes or no in pity of his lost voice. They tested the reflex in his knees, the one where they hit a little hammer and his leg unwillingly kicked out. Every little success was met by a small cheer, and Midoriya, who was more than a little overwhelmed, just smiled and let the relief of his awakening wash over him as well. But it wasn't until a few hours later that Midoriya truly appreciated being alive again. That was when the door to his hospital room swung open once more and revealed a short, plump lady, holding a handkerchief in her trembling hands, who took small steps forward, tears streaming silently down her face as she inched closer. "Aizuku," Inko stammered, her big green eyes gazing down at the matching ones of her son. "Mom." She leapt forward with a painful cry and pulled Midoriya into a warm embrace. And slowly but surely, Midoriya wrapped his own arms around her, burying his face into her shoulder and leaving the sodden marks of his tears behind. "Thank you," he murmured quietly in her ear, his voice raw and painful from disuse, but he knew that he had to say this, nonetheless. "F for W?" she sobbed as she pulled away from their hug, cupping his face in her hands and gazing at it lovingly despite the oxygen mask that still covered a majority of it. "For not giving up on me,"